Chapter 1807. Defecting to the enemy midway was something Levis had never imagined. He didn't know if he was doing the right thing, but he analyzed the current situation. Given that he couldn't trust Michael ACI, Raven, and the church that had wanted to separate him from the very beginning, working with Wagwa Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect seemed to be the only correct path. As for framing number 60 high, Levis felt that he didn't have the ability to cover all aspects at the moment. Furthermore, he didn't have the ability to make the already dead Great Pope fall back into that state of suspended animation. If he did that, Battle Sect would definitely be able to find some clues as to how he had done it. Furthermore, if he put the blame on number 60 high for the Great Pope's death, it might directly trigger a war between two cultivation countries. This was also one of the paths that Levis had never considered. Although he had used the truck driver to frame the eldest miss of Wagwa Water Curtain Group for his subordinate Mei Li's death, in the end, it was just a small matter. If one Mei Li fell, thousands of Mei Lis would rise again, but the Great Pope was different. He was the backbone of faith in Mishio, a huge cultivation country. If he collapsed, the consequences would be very hard to predict. In short, starting a war wasn't something Levis wanted to see. His original intention had only been to suppress Wagwa Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect and restrict their development. He hadn't really wanted to crush them to death with one blow. Because from a businessman's point of view, money still had to be earned. With material goods as a condition, the body would always be more honest than the mouth. Once a war broke out, it would always be the people of the two cultivation countries who would suffer. Without a stable living environment, how could they earn money at ease? After quickly packing up the Great Pope's body, Levis put it in a huge fridge, and then put the fridge into his space with a storage bag. By the time he was done, it was already early in the morning. He could only talk to Lotus Sun now, so he had to go to number 60 High's hotel, and he had to do it under the cover of night. Otherwise, it would be too conspicuous to move a corpse on the road. Levis was in the car. He had just driven out of his villa when he saw through the rearview mirror that someone was actually chasing him at a very high speed. Who sent this person? Levis instantly became nervous. A very strong murderous aura. It spread all the way to the back of his neck. It made his hair stand on end. At the same time, he slammed on the accelerator and increased the horsepower to the maximum. At the same time, he pressed the button on the car's wings and rushed straight into the sky. However, the person chasing him did not give up and directly took out his spiritual sword and followed behind him. Only then did Levis realize that there was more than one person chasing him. From all directions, the black-clothed men who were chasing after him formed an encirclement, as if they had planned this beforehand. What were these people trying to do? Could it be that he had already discovered that he had killed the Great Pope? But this was too much of a coincidence. How was this possible? He had just killed the Great Pontiff, and now he was being targeted by a group of people? As he was fleeing for his life, Levis's brain was working at the same time. The only possibility he could think of was that this might really be a trap. A plot to put him to death, damn it. He controlled the steering wheel and did all kinds of extreme maneuvers in the air. Behind him, a dozen black-clothed men stepped on their spirit swords and turned into meteors as they followed closely behind. This kind of speed was almost as fast as a car. It was extremely exaggerated. At this time, Levis felt as if he was being targeted by a pack of hungry wolves. Moreover, it was a pack of hungry wolves that had been starving for a few days. They rushed forward recklessly, looking as if they would not stop until they caught up with him. Levis gritted his teeth. When the car drove to the ferry lake in Glio City, he directly plunged into the lake. Under the water, no matter how high one's realm was, one's movement would be limited to a certain extent. However, what made Levis extremely horrified was, at the bottom of the ferry lake, there were actually people waiting for him. Just like the black-clothed men who were chasing him, once they saw Levis diving into the lake, they directly waved the spirit swords in their hands. The golden blades of light instantly slashed across the bottom of the lake, forming a splitting force. They surrounded his car from all directions and instantly cut it into several pieces. Then, under the lake, a huge explosion occurred in Levis's car. This was caused by the deflagration of the spirit stones in the car after the energy was ignited, and a huge water column rushed up from the lake surface. Covered in blood from the explosion, Levis used all his strength to escape from the lake, and crawled ashore in an extremely sorry state. At that moment, the black-clothed men who had been chasing him relentlessly also instantly surrounded him. It was only then that Levis could clearly see the slightly familiar markings on these black-clothed men, as well as the black and red spirit swords they were all equipped with. In almost every city in Michio Nation, there was a group of Darkwing enforcers who only lived at night. They maintained the safety of the city at night and effectively reduced the chances of crime at night. However, these Darkwing enforcers were also part of the army, and were under the jurisdiction of Mikaxi. Levis knew that there was such a group in Glio City, but this was his first time seeing them in person. "You're Mikaxi's men." His vision was blurry as Levis saw who this group of black-clothed men were. "Mr. Levis, because you're suspected of being involved in the disappearance of the Great Pope, we're here on General Mikaxi's orders to arrest you. We hope you'll cooperate." The leader of the black-clothed men stepped forward. "I see." In an instant, Levis understood everything. All of this was revealed in his mind with a single glance as Michael ACI revealed his identity to the public. He shifted forward and used the last of his strength to escape, but this group of dark wings behind him didn't give him any chance at all. Bang! Bang! 2 gunshots rang out in quick succession from that black and red special spirit sword and hit both of his calves. Levis knew that there was no way for him to escape. He closed his eyes and sighed in his heart. At the same time, he wondered why he had fallen to this state. At that very moment, amidst the deathly silence, he suddenly heard the sound of a few people falling to the ground. Just beside him, a few dark wings had suddenly fallen, falling right beside him. It was a youngster with snow-white hair. He had suddenly appeared here like a ghost, like the incarnation of dark shadow. Under the bright moonlight, his white hair danced in the wind and gave off a faint luster, which was especially eye-catching at this moment. Levis's eyes were blurry, and coupled with his serious injuries, his mind was a little confused in that instant. "You're 5. The youngster, 5 my ass." He was Wang Ying. "Set a small target first, like 1 second. Remember, booksellers." Chapter 1808. In the nick of time, Wang Ying appeared by the shore of Fairy Lake and protected Levis, who was surrounded by Darkwing. Facing the sudden appearance of the white-haired young man, the group of dark shadows was stunned. They wiped their smart law enforcement goggles. Technological means were completely ineffective in front of Wang Ying. They couldn't see Wang Ying's face at all. All they could feel was a mass of nothingness. One of them took off his smart enforcer mirror and tried to use his own spiritual energy to test Wang Ying. In the end, he screamed in pain and fell to his knees with bloodshot eyes. An existence that could not be seen, this was something that only the upper almighty beings could do. In an instant, these dark wings' eyes stared blankly and their nerves tensed up. Who was this person, and why was he here? "Leader, what should we do now?" Seeing this, the members of Darkwing communicated with each other through voice transmission. They really did not know what to do. Wang Ying was too powerful. If they fought him head-on, they would only die. On the other hand, they were here under Maxi's orders. Military orders were absolute. They had to bring Levis back. If they failed the mission, they would probably be punished. If they returned unscathed, they would probably die. After thinking it over, the leader of Darkwing took a deep breath. He took off his smart enforcer mirror and took out a cigarette in front of Wang Ying. After lighting it up, he put it in his mouth and stared at Wang Ying. "Senior, we're here under General Maxi's orders. I hope you won't make things difficult for us. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble." Wang Ying squinted his eyes and smiled. He did not answer their question directly. "I'll give you a count of 10. Run. If you don't leave before my countdown ends, you'll all die." He stared at Darkwing, who was in the air without fear. "Then, Senior, please forgive us for our offense. The party leader of Dark Wing took a step forward. Using a hand gesture as a signal, he instantly linked the members around him to form a sword formation. The moonlit fairy lake rippled at this moment. The spiritual light emitted by the combined sword formation shone down from the sky and was reflected on the surface of the lake, forming a clear circle of spiritual tattoos. He didn't believe that Wang Ying would really attack them. This was Glio City, a modern cultivation city with strict discipline and cultivation rules. Killing a law enforcer in public in such a place was something that even an almighty could not do. If they were found out, wouldn't the force that the other party belonged to become the target of public criticism? Hence, this party leader Dark Wing was taking a gamble. He was betting that Wang Ying wouldn't dare to kill them. Therefore, he ordered for the sword array to be formed in an attempt to fight against Wang Ying. At this moment, Wang Ying lifted Levis up and placed him on his shoulder. Facing the tens of thousands of murderous sword shadows on the lake, he kept his promise and counted. 10. 9. 8. From the beginning to the end, he maintained his smile. It was the kind of relaxed demeanor that exuded a terrifying pressure at the same time. With every number he counted, Dark Wing could feel a terrifying bloodlust surging up his spine. 7, 6, 5, Wang Ying was still counting down. Everyone was stunned as the countdown rang out like the Grim Reaper's bell. Wang Ying clearly hadn't made any moves yet, but as the countdown rang out, it was as if they could see the virtual image of a black-robed Grim Reaper behind the youngster. It was a humanoid skeletal creature, tall and awe-inspiring, and as white as jade. Its eye sockets were filled with arrogance and indifference, and it had the power to despise everything. This was Wang Ying's Dharma spirit. Completely different from Wang Ling's cosmic wisdom and extreme gentleness, this was a war machine worthy of its name. Kill. Terrifying. Heartless. This was the synonym for Wang Ying's Dharma spirit. For a moment, Fairy Lake was dead silent. Wang Ying hadn't even moved when this Dharma spirit appeared, but cracks immediately appeared in the sword array that had just been formed in the air. It had been directly shattered by this aura, and this Dark Wing was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Quick, run. Just as Wang Ying was about to count down to the last 3, the Dark Wing team leader instantly roared as if he had woken up from a nightmare. He realized that this wasn't an existence they could contend with, it was a superdimensional power that surpassed their understanding. This resolute killing intent forced this Dark Wing team leader to make the decision to retreat after Wang Ying counted down to 3. He would rather take the blame himself than watch his young teammates die with him. How boring. Wang Ying secretly snorted. He had thought that these people were tough, but he had still scared them off. But the truth was that even if he did make a move, he would be careful not to take their lives. Even if he accidentally beat them to the brink of death, he would still think of a way to save them. Seeing that everyone had retreated, Wang Ying teleported and brought them to a safe place in an instant. Right after that, he smacked Levis's butt. You, wake up, stop pretending. Levis immediately opened his eyes. Wang Ying threw Levis down, and only then did Levis realize that he was at the top of the Star Tower. Thank you for saving me, Senior. He bowed to Wang Ying. While Wang Ying was confronting the group of Dark Wings, Levis realized that his wounds had all healed. Wang Ying had used a healing spell to heal them. This healing speed was faster than going to the hospital, and it required a large amount of spiritual energy to be used in a short period of time. But it was obvious that this spiritual energy was only a drop in the ocean for Wang Ying. It was not worth mentioning. Levis immediately determined that the person who had saved him was the immemorial being that had been mentioned in the intelligence report. According to the intelligence report, there were at least a dozen immemorial beings in the battle sect. Levis didn't know which one Wang Ying was currently. Senior, are you the Eternal One? Levis asked. Wang Ying smirked. You seem to know a lot. In reality, Wang Ying was extremely disdainful. He did not care about any Eternal One at all. In Wang Ying's eyes, most Eternal Ones were rotten fish and prawns, not worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as him. I've only heard about it from the intel I've received. Levis smiled bitterly. To be honest, I didn't think Mikoxi would be so ruthless. He purposely lured the great Pope into my courtyard, made me kill him by mistake, and then hunted me down in the name of law enforcement. So you have nowhere to go now. Wang Ying said. If you want to live, you must listen to our orders. That's for sure, Senior. Levis said submissively. Where's the great Pope's body? Wang Ying asked. It's here. I've been carrying it with me. Levis took out his storage bag and took out the fridge. Wang Ying moved his finger and opened the fridge, then took out the great Pope's body. He then raised his fingers, as if he was grabbing something. Levis rubbed his eyes, and was shocked to find that the great Pope's shadow had been taken out by the battle sect senior who saved him. Wang Ying sneered. Without another word, he directly injected the great Pope's shadow into Levis's body. This was the shadow membrane assimilation technique. It could use the power of a shadow to attach to another person's body, causing the first shadow to be covered by a designated second shadow membrane. For a short period of time, the person would obtain the exact same memories and abilities as the second shadow's original owner, even their appearance would change into the original owner's appearance. This was a secret technique that originated from the Shadow Dao. In the universe, other than the Wang siblings, there was currently no other method to distinguish between the real and the fake. At the same time, this was Wang Ying's plan. Right now, he wanted to protect Levis. The best way was to turn him into the Great Pope, and reappear in front of the people who killed the Great Pope. Chapter 1809. Everything was going according to plan. Levis, who had assumed the identity of the Great Pope, was no different from an obvious wolf in a werewolf hunt. Even if Mikoasi and Paloki knew that the Great Pope was already dead and that the person in front of them might be a fake pope, they wouldn't act rashly. They would only secretly plot to verify the Great Pope's true identity. Unfortunately, given the current methods on Earth, there was no way to see through Wang Yuan's disguise under the shadow assimilation spell. Levis's shadow had already been surrounded by the Great Pope's shadow, and he had obtained all of the Great Pope's memories, while he himself was the Great Pope himself. His blood, fingerprints, and DNA data would all become a perfect match for the Great Pope, and there would be no mistakes at all. Do you know what you should do now? Wang Ying asked as she looked at Levis. This kind of disguise was already beyond Levis's imagination. Looking at this body that had been completely transformed by the shadow assimilation spell, and the memories that poured into his mind, Levis's face was first filled with astonishment, and then all his emotions turned into a kind of uncontrollable anger. He had inherited the Great Pope's will, and had even more so obtained all of the Great Pope's original thoughts and thoughts. Not only did he know that the church planned to attack Huagua Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect, he also clearly understood the Great Pope's attitude toward him. Now, Levis knew everything. He knew that the church had indeed intended to abandon him from the beginning. Furthermore, because of Raven's persuasion, the church hadn't changed their initial strategy toward him. For the church, he was now just a useless pawn, and a pawn that knew too much. After using him, they had to destroy him once and for all. According to the church's original plan, after Raven completely took over Scarlet Orchid Association, they would take advantage of Levis's slack to get rid of him as well. That woman, she knew from the beginning that the Great Pope still wanted to get rid of me. To think that she could even talk about sincere cooperation. Levis smiled bitterly. He felt disgusted at being so deeply deceived that his stomach churned and he retched. He had thought that his relationship with the church was unbreakable, but he had never thought that the White Warriors that Raven had secretly formed over the years would form an unimaginable bond with the church. It was also this layer of fetters and deeper cooperation that caused the church to completely abandon him. Levis had been completely kept in the dark before, and had no idea about this at all. Now that he was the Great Pope, the fog in front of his eyes instantly cleared up. He began to disgust the church, and hated the Great Pope, Raven, Michael ACI, and that Heavenly Tao alliance that only knew how to smooth things over, of course. What made him even more disgusted was Heavenly Dog, who had been plotting behind the scenes. Even the Great Pope was one of the leading members of the Tengu. The infiltration of this organization and the influence it would bring in the future were immeasurable. At this moment, Levis looked at Wang Ying. Although he still could not see Wang Ying's face clearly, he knew that this senior from the battle sect was the last straw that he could tightly hold on to. Senior, don't worry. I will fully cooperate with you in the following operation. I of to of. Very well. Wang Ying nodded. Levis was still a smart person, which made him very satisfied. As the saying went, you might know a person for a long time, but not their heart. This shadow assimilation spell allowed Levis to completely understand the role of the church, and completely cut off the last bit of trust he had in the church. Wang Ying threw a phone to Levis. The phone was loaded with the Grey Church's exclusive app. It was an app that was enchanted, and would only appear when it passed through Levis's hands. If someone picked up Levis's phone or checked the contents, the app would automatically hide it and delete all the messages. Information cultivation spells were also one of the hottest topics this year. With the development of cultivation modernization, the development of information-based cultivation spells would also become a key link in the future. I understand, Senior. Levis took the phone and nodded. Also, you have been given a new ability. Wang Ying said, to ensure the smooth development of this intelligence mission, you can now read the thoughts of others as long as you come into contact with their shadows. Come into contact with their shadows? For example, in the middle of a conversation, find the right light and angle so that your shadow touches the shadow of the person you want to test. That way, you'll know that you'll be able to learn most of the information in their mind. You can do that. Levis was completely stupefied. Meanwhile, on the other side, the number 60 high team was still trying to understand the rules of the variety competition this time. Variety shows were meant to be fun and spoof. Usually, they wouldn't really do anything to the guests, let alone kill them. But after hearing Lotus Sun's rules, everyone from number 60 high suddenly had a bad feeling. For example, in the escape segment in the first round, 6 people would be locked up in different rooms in pairs. Wang Muyu would also be locked up in an independent space in the center of the city, waiting to be rescued. According to the rules, the team that broke the shackles first and found the 3 keys corresponding to the 3 rooms to rescue the little friends in the center of the city would win. Wang Ling understood this principle, but for some reason, the more he listened, the more it sounded like a magically modified version of Saw. Was it true that people were locked up to escape? Did they have to cut off their arms and legs? Wang Ling felt that this was a little too exaggerated. But given the current situation, they had to participate in the variety competition, so how to split them up was a problem. How about this, I'll split up with Old Gua. Fang Xing and classmate Li Yuyue. Let's split Lingzi with Boss Sun, Super Chen suggested at that moment. In his view, this was a flawless grouping plan. Their original purpose in coming to Glio City had been to help out. Thus, they hadn't forgotten their original mission. Lotus Sun hadn't expected Super Chen to actually be so awesome, and was instantly moved to tears. Super Chen gave Lotus Sun a thumbs up, then patted his chest to tell her that he hadn't forgotten his original intentions. Wang Ling saw all of this simple body language, and knew very well what it meant, but this kind of grouping was still a little unstable for Wang Ling. After all, this meant that the strongest people would be grouped into one group. He and Lotus Sun were both very strong. With Fang Xing taking care of Li Yuyue, they naturally didn't have to worry about escaping. It was just Super Chen and Hero Gua. One had a blessed mouth and the other had many uncles. Who knew what kind of trouble these two would come up with together? Chapter 1810. A mysterious senior had protected Levis, and the entire Darkwing Brigade was heavily injured. This was the latest news Maiko ACI received at dawn. Originally, the Darkwing Brigade that he had assigned to capture Levis had been carefully selected by Makoxi. Every single one of them was a talent. In the end, under the protection of a mysterious senior, the entire Darkwing Brigade's operation was thwarted. Wang Ying, on the other hand, felt wronged because he really did not make a move. If he had, none of the Darkwing Brigade members would have returned alive. Unfortunately, even if he did not make a move, the Darkwing Brigade members were still injured, and all of them were bruised. As for the most heavily injured person, it was the Darkwing leader who was lying on a stretcher with several broken ribs. General. General. It's your subordinates' fault, he said weakly, his face pale. Maiko ACI could tell that this was not an act, but a real injury. There's no need to say anything. Maikoasi returned the gesture and held his hand. He was touched by the fact that these Darkwing members were putting their lives on the line. He could guess that the person who protected Levis was someone sent by the battle sect, and it was most likely an ancient one. In the face of a battle that was impossible to win, this party leader Darkwing still took the lead and led his brothers to charge forward in unison. Although Makosai did not witness the scene at that time, he still felt extremely moved when he imagined it. Facing this group of warriors, he naturally could not criticize them. Rest in peace and recuperate. I understand the situation, Maiko ACI said. Although he was usually strict, he was kind to his subordinates. As long as they tried their best, he would not make things difficult for them. Although what he did not know was that after Wang Ying left with Levis, this group of Darkwing squad had beaten each other to the point of crippling themselves. If it was not for that, the Darkwing Brigade leader felt that he would not have survived this ordeal. After sending off the Darkwing Brigade, Maiko ACI's expression was solemn for a long time. Based on the current situation, Levis was most likely rescued by someone sent by the battle sect, and he did not know Levis's exact location. However, if he could not find Levis, he was worried that his plan to frame Levis would be exposed. General. At the entrance of West Wind Castle, an army soldier suddenly ran in from afar. What is it? The Great Pontiff wants to see the general, the soldier said. Great Pontiff? Maikoasi was stunned, and his mind went blank on the spot. He thought he had misheard. However, after thinking about it carefully and confirming that it was the Great Pontiff, he came back to his senses in shock. That old man, he had clearly already, why did he suddenly come back to life? Maikoasi thought about it and came up with a general possibility. This Great Pontiff might not be the real Great Pontiff. How could a dead person come back to life? Levis. Maiko ACI chewed on the name carefully. His lips curled into a cold smile. He had more or less made a judgment on this matter. But this was good too. It would save him the trouble of looking for Levis everywhere in fear. Impersonating the Supreme Pontiff was a capital offense. How dare this mafia boss? How could he have the guts to pretend to be the boss of an old Yuan venerate? My ACI smiled. His heart was clear. All that was left was to expose Levis's fake identity, and everything would be solved. Once Levis was dead, all the blame could be pushed to Levis. On the other side, Team 1 leader Paloki of the Heavenly Dao Union was also very anxious. As the source of the entire framing incident, he had thought that his plan to push the blame for the Supreme Pontiff's death to Maikoasi had been perfect. However, the outcome had been unexpected, because he had also received an invitation from the church. The Supreme Pontiff was looking for him for a discussion. But the Supreme Pontiff was clearly dead. What was going on? Dear, what do we do now? Paloki's wife was very anxious and helpless. Her hair had turned white overnight, and she had not expected this situation at all. I suspect that Maikoasi already guessed that this was a framing. That's why he set this up. Paloki frowned. How could a dead person come back to life? Then what should we do now? It's better to bide our time, Paloki said. If I'm not wrong, this Supreme Pontiff is a fake one. It's very likely that Maikoasi found someone to impersonate him. He wants to test our reaction. If I show too much shock when I see the Supreme Pontiff, I will definitely be exposed. But I have to go now. Everything will be fine, right? Yes, everything will be fine. Paloki sighed endlessly in his heart as he did his best to comfort his wife. Don't worry, I won't show any flaws. As long as I firmly believe that this fake Supreme Pontiff is the real Supreme Pontiff, there won't be a problem. Of course, if this matter doesn't end well in the end, there's only one last step left. He didn't continue. Because that was a very crazy and scary idea. In order to protect his family from being affected. As a last resort. He could only think of a way to make this fake Supreme Pontiff and Mycoacy perish together. At the same time, everyone at number 60 high also received new information from none other than Mycoacy's daughter, Micah Bay, and Paloki's son, Pei Xiaoyuan. The two of them didn't provide any substantial information, and only gave a simple description of the current atmosphere at home. Because of the Supreme Pontiff, the atmosphere on both sides seemed quite heavy. And almost all of this was within Wang Ling's calculations. In the room, Lotus Sun covered her small mouth slightly, her heart stunned. She had thought that she already had a comprehensive understanding of this teenager, but after this incident, she felt that her understanding of Wang Ling had been renewed once again. It really wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Wang Ling Director Wang tonight. Now, the forces that had joined forces to deal with them in Banglio City were starting to suspect and bite each other. Although they didn't know what the final outcome would be, it would be too difficult for the other side to split their attention to deal with Huagua Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect while they were busy with their own affairs. If the hearts of the people weren't united, even if a plan was forcibly drawn up, it would definitely be full of loopholes. In fact, even Wang Ling himself hadn't expected that with just a few arrangements, the other side's rhythm would be completely disrupted. So compared with these extremely weak forces, what gave Wang Ling a bigger headache now was the upcoming variety competition. After all, in the first round, he and Lotus Sunday, they would be locked up together. Chapter 1811. That morning, Lavin sent a group message to Mike Axie, Pei Luochi, and Leaves on WeChat to briefly explain today's arrangements. In the end, it was as if the two of them had disappeared, and didn't reply to her. But the plan still had to go ahead. Not replying for the time being didn't mean that Lavin would stop the rest of the plan. Every segment of the variety show challenge competition this time was a test of humanity. She wanted to make public the ugliness of those people from number 60 high, and more importantly, the ugliness of the eldest miss of Huagua Water Curtain Group. She didn't know what on earth had happened to Mike Axie, Pei Luochi and Leaves, but early in the morning, the other representative of the Heavenly Tao Alliance, Jiu Yun, who was to play the role of a primary school student in this variety show challenge competition, punctually appeared in front of Lady Lavin, followed by a group of white warriors. Jiu Yun wasn't very tall. It was said that his body had stopped growing because he cultivated a special technique. He looked like a child, but was in fact already an old monster. When he stood up, he was about the same height as Wang Wuyu. He wore a black one-piece work outfit, had long light blonde hair, and even had earrings in his ears. His eyes were bright, and from a distance, he looked like a little girl. Lord Jiu Yun, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Lady Lavin stood up and warmly shook his hand. Jiu Yun looked at Madame Lavin's hand with disinterest. In the end, she only extended her index finger and touched her finger symbolically. She had quite the personality. When will the operation begin? Jiu Yun didn't say much, and asked directly. Very soon, Lord Jiu Yun. But before that, you need to change your image a little. To be honest, you don't look like a child at all. Lavin smiled. Lord Jiu Yun is playing the role of a primary school student this time, so his overall temperament is more like one. I've already prepared the props and school uniform for Lord Jiu Yun. I hope Lord Jiu Yun can take off your accessories and hide your tattoo. Your hair. Don't touch my hair, Jiu Yun looked at Lavin and said firmly. Okay. I won't touch your hair. Lavin had no choice but to agree. Lord Jiu Yun, do you have any other instructions? Jiu Yun lowered her small head and pondered for a moment. Then, she raised her head and looked at Lavin. If I can't control myself during the challenge and make a killing move, you'll take care of it later, right? This, naturally. Lavin nodded her head. However, I hope that Lord Jiu Yun can control himself as much as possible. You can injure him, but you must not kill him. I can only do my best. Jiu Yun said, I'm acting as an elementary school student, but I'm not really an elementary school student. That kid at number 60 high is a proper primary school student. I hate brats the most. If that brat attacks me, I really won't be able to hold myself back. Before coming here, Jill Yun had already gone through the information on everyone from number 60 high in detail. They were just a few foundation establishment students, and didn't look like they were worth paying attention to. In particular, Wang Muyu was taking part in the competition with a 6-year-old child. In Jill Yun's opinion, Wang Muyu was simply a burden to everyone at number 60 high. Apart from that Miss Sun, there was nothing worth paying attention to at all in the data. Jill Yun also didn't know why so many experts had died at number 60 high. It was Wang Ling's first time participating in the recording of a variety show. Early in the morning, thanks to Wicked GPS, they smoothly arrived at the agreed filming location. This was a large sports center in Griot City, which was only used for large-scale national cultivation sports events. Previously, it had often been requisitioned by Griot City's local cultivation troops as a military demonstration and training ground. But now, Lavin had actually requisitioned this vast piece of land for the recording of a variety show, and had even remodeled the interior. One couldn't help but sigh at Lavin's strength and methods. This large sports center had been built in a desolate part of Griot City. Originally, there had been a tall mountain here, and the entire gymnasium had been built against the mountain. The inside of the mountain had been directly hollowed out to make room for the gymnasium. The key was that the exterior structure of the mountain had been preserved as a whole through the technical excavation, and the spirit veins under the mountain hadn't been destroyed. Even a spirit gathering array didn't need to be drawn. This was a natural place for cultivation and seclusion. For the recording of the variety show this time, Lavin had once again invested heavily in remodeling the interior structure of the sports center. When Wang Ling's group arrived, they saw a lot of program staff gathered together, and the photography team was remotely testing whether the camera balls were working properly. It was such a huge lineup that Wang Ling felt a little uncomfortable. Although he could wear a mask throughout the recording of the variety show this time and didn't need to show his face, in front of so many people, Wang Ling still felt like his social phobia was acting up faintly. He didn't know if there were other people like him. As long as there were a lot of people around, their minds would involuntarily start to blank out, and they wouldn't know what to do or say next. It was like they were detached from the world and didn't fit in. Fortunately, this process didn't last long, and by the time they entered the studio, Wang Ling's symptoms had eased a lot. The staff were mainly gathered in the temporary shed outside. After entering the remodeled studio, there were not so many people following the people who participated in the recording. They were surrounded by flying photography balls, recording the situation inside from 360 degrees without any blind spots. After waiting for less than a few minutes, Wang Ling saw number 60 high's opponents from another entrance. There were also 6 people leading a primary school student who was about the same height as Wang Muyu, and they directly entered the studio. Each of them was wearing a turbine mask. Are they the 6 prodigies from Glio? Super Chen's expression was slightly surprised under the mask with the number 60 high logo on it. Whirlpool Emperor High School is the number 1 high school in Glio. The 6 prodigies this time are all from here. As an old intelligence expert, Hirogwa had already inquired about these 6 prodigies. They're all grade 1 students like us, but they've already reached the golden core stage. All of them are golden core cultivators. That's so unfair. It's just that they have an advantage in terms of realm. There's almost no actual battle in the preparation part of the program. It's more of a test of teamwork, Hirogwa said. In fact, he himself wasn't very confident. After the 2 sides shook hands, everyone was put on masks by the staff, and they were divided into black and white sections based on their schools. There were 3 secret rooms in each of the black and white areas. Based on the previous team distribution, everyone was arranged in groups of 2 into the secret rooms. From the perspective of the void, the place where everyone was standing was a Tai Chi disc. Wang Muyu and Jiao Yun were brought to 2 special cages in the middle of the Tai Chi plate, Yin in Yang, and Yin in Yang, respectively. On Wang Ling's side, it was a little more exciting. When he clearly heard the heavy stone door of the secret room close, the only sound left in the room was the sound of his and Lotus Sun's breathing in the darkness. In this quiet environment, even the sound of their breathing was particularly clear. It was really too clear. Wang Ling could even clearly count her heartbeat. Chapter 1812. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun were locked up in a square secret room that was 80 feet long and wide. Super Chen and Hero Guo were in one group, while Li Yuyue and Fang Xing were in the other, and they were also locked up. At this moment, everyone was facing the same problem. He realized that both his and Lotus Sun's hands had been shackled in special shackles, and it would have been very difficult for a normal Foundation establishment cultivator to pry them open. He and Lotus Sun's shackles were the same. One end was connected to him, while the other was connected to Lotus Sun's hand after winding around the giant stone lock at the very front of the secret chamber. The key to unlock the shackles was behind the stone lock. That was a very extreme position. If one person moved closer to the key, the shackles would retract towards the other person and finally hit the soft needles on the back wall. These soft needles all had paralyzing venom. Once they were hit, it meant that they would lose a member of their team for at least the next 2 to 3 rounds. It might even become a breakthrough point. Of course, it was not that there was no way to ensure everyone's survival. There was a small saw at a place where the two of them could reach, but it was impossible to cut the chain with just a small saw, unless one of them was sacrificed to cut off their hands. Wang Ling could tell that this was the plot of Saw. Sure enough, modern variety shows always paid homage to the classics. He sighed inwardly and was seriously thinking of countermeasures, but the predicament he was facing didn't end there. Lotus Sun's heartbeat was too fast, and it was especially obvious in such a quiet environment. Bang, 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 Wang Ling's eardrums were constantly irritated. He had already strengthened Lotus Sun quite a bit, and the girl had been through a lot recently, so it was reasonable to say that she shouldn't be that scared. It could only be said that girls were afraid of the dark. After thinking for a long time, this was the only answer he could come up with. He didn't know how to comfort her, so in the end, he could only clumsily say, "Don't be afraid." These words made Lotus Sun's heart beat faster, and she blushed so much that she buried her face in her knees. Even with the mask, she was still worried that he would notice her expression. Now that she had strength, how could she be afraid of the layout of this secret room? It was all because he was locked up with this idiot. However, it was normal for the blockhead in front of her to be insensitive. Lotus Sun was already used to it. Therefore, her challenge was no longer limited to this small secret room and the challenge on the variety show. It was very easy for her to break through the secret room, but more importantly, she had to make this blockhead understand her intentions. In such a dark environment, she could use her fear of the dark as an excuse to appear a little more afraid than usual. Who knew, she might be able to make this blockhead come to his senses and protect her. In that case, she would be able to get closer to Wang Ling. Thus, for Lotus Sun at present, she only had one mission, and that was to never let Wang Ling know that she wasn't afraid of the dark at all. As for the other side, for Wang Ling, his challenges were no longer limited to this small secret room and the challenge on the variety show. Breaking the secret room was very easy for him, but it was more important to keep a low profile. Even in such a dim environment, there were still so many camera balls surrounding them from all angles. Even if they were covered by masks, the variety show would still be broadcasted after the filming was completed. This was only the first segment. If he performed too well at this time, he would definitely be remembered by the audience. Participating in the variety show was already against the old Wang family's low-key strategy to begin with, so Wang Ling now only had one thought, and that was to appear as low-key and useless as possible, leaving everything to Lotus Sunday. But the problem was that he hadn't expected Lotus Sun to actually be afraid of the dark. There was no other way. In this situation, Wang Ling didn't want to do it himself, but he and Lotus Sun were now in the same boat, and someone had to come out and perform. Thus, Wang Ling suddenly thought of a way. He could use his fear of the dark as an excuse to hide in a corner and wait for Lotus Sun to make a move. According to scientific research, under extreme circumstances, people could stimulate their adrenal glands and thus need to break through. Being afraid of the dark was just a small problem. Wang Ling believed that given Lotus Sun's personality, she would definitely be able to overcome it in a short time. Thus, for Wang Ling now, he only had one mission, and that was to never let Lotus Sun know that he actually wasn't afraid of the dark. Lotus Sun buried her face in her knees for a long time. She thought that Wang Ling would think of a way to comfort her, but in the end, she never expected that this youngster who had just told her, "Don't be afraid," would actually bury his face in his knees. She was shocked. It turned out that Wang Ling was also afraid of the dark. This was something that Lotus Sun had never expected. But Wang Ling with his face buried in his knees was really cute. Out of the corner of her eye, Lotus Sun sized up the youngster who was in the same position as her, and her thoughts ran wild. She suddenly felt, in such a dark environment, staying with Wang Ling like this also seemed pretty good. It was impossible to struggle. She was now chained to a chain by Wang Ling. Perhaps her warmth and thoughts could be transmitted directly to this youngster's heart through this chain. At the same time, in a temporary recording shed set up outside the sports center, Madame Lavin and a group of cameramen who were manipulating camera balls with remote controls stared dumbfoundedly at the scene in front of them. The variety show had just started, and the most interesting part was the secret room where eldest Miss Sun was in. Both of them had actually buried their faces in their knees without moving at all. "Teacher Ma, what's going on? Why isn't the camera ball moving at all?" Madame Lavin asked a cameraman surnamed Ma. "Madam, this isn't a still image. Instead, those two really aren't moving at all. Maybe they're afraid of the dark." This cameraman smiled bitterly. "In theory, this is also a sign of tacit understanding, but there's nothing we can do about it in this situation. We can only let them find a breakthrough on their own." Madame Lavin had already suspected that there was a hidden expert among the number 60 high team. She had thought that through this segment, she would be able to find out who the hidden expert was, and had focused most of her energy on Lotus Sun and Wang Ling's team. A woman's intuition told her that these two were the most likely suspects. But Madame Lavin had never expected them to actually be afraid of the dark. The show had just started, and they were already burying their faces in their knees like ostriches. "This old lady invited you here to perform, not to act cute. How could this be? Hurry up and think of something. We can't let them keep doing this. Think of a way to provoke them," Madame Lavin said. She didn't believe that these two would remain indifferent after she increased the intensity. Chapter 1813. Because this was a recorded variety competition, Lavin thought that all the dramatic changes were within his control. Before a variety show was edited, in order to enrich the elements, the guests would often be stimulated to give a lot of unexpected feedback, and finally, the show would be more interesting and exciting through editing. There were even times when malicious editing techniques were used to create a topic of conversation. These were the unspoken rules of the industry. Compared with the indifferent number 60 high school students, the performance of the 6 great child prodigies in Maelstrom Emperor was incomparably brilliant. They were also trapped in a secret room in pairs, but these people used different methods to break free of the chains in front of them. As expected of the 6 top geniuses among the new students in Maelstrom Emperor, they can actually rely on their spirit roots to extract trace elements from the air and synthesize them into simple talisman materials. Cinnabar, yellow talismans, spirit water, and writing brush. In number 60 high school's first talisman class, it had actually been mentioned that these were the 4 basic materials for making talismans. However, there were times when it was impossible to have such a complete set of materials in an extreme environment, and they could only look for alternatives. Elemental powder, which could be condensed from trace elements extracted from the air, was the perfect material to replace cinnabar. In the absence of yellow talismans, one could also tear one's clothes into strips of cloth to replace the talismans. High-ranking almighty beings could even directly bite their fingertips to draw talismans on the rough ground or even in the air. This was because the spirit energy in their bodies was strong enough, and the spirit power in their blood was strong enough to replace specific spirit water. As for their fingers, they were ready-made materials to replace the shaft of a writing brush. Of course, there were also some people who would pull out their hair and use it to write. The methods used by the 6 people in Maelstrom Emperor were almost the same. They all wrote talismans to help them break free. The 2 people in Maelstrom Emperor's first secret room both had water spirit roots. Inside the secret room, they created a corrosive mist talisman that was harmless to the human body, but had a strong corrosive power on metal. Little by little, they increased the density of the mist, and the corrosive mist corroded the chains. This method was very slow, but it was effective enough. The show's production staff estimated that it would take about 2 hours for these two people to be completely free. The people locked up in Maelstrom Emperor's second secret room were gold and fire spirit roots, and the methods they used were even more amazing. They directly created a weapon-strengthening talisman to enchant and strengthen the metal saw next to them. They've actually mastered such a complicated strengthening method. Quite a number of the program producers were stunned when they saw the image on the camera. As long as he strengthened the metal saw to +6, he could easily saw through the chain. But this kind of strengthening depended on luck. If he failed even once in the middle, he would have to start from the beginning again. Therefore, the two of them took off their jackets and cut them into countless strips of cloth, looking as if they were ready to go all out. Thus, these two people took off their coats and cut them into countless strips as they prepared to go. As for the last two prodigies in the Maelstrom Emperor, they were people with Earth Spirit Root and with Spirit Root respectively. The two of them combined their own physical conditions and used simple talismans to modify their arms. This was a method to assimilate a part of one's body with nature. Although the shackles restricted the human body, as long as one's arms were turned into soil or branches, one could easily break free from the shackles. If there was light, their assimilation speed would be greatly increased. Unfortunately, the dark environment limited their assimilation speed. Otherwise, this group of people would definitely be the first to escape. With these 6 people in Whirlpool Emperor as a comparison, the people on number 60 High's side were clearly salted fish. The contrast could be said to be very obvious. It can't be. They can't all be salted fish, right? Madame Raven sucked in a breath of cold air with a somewhat incredulous expression on her face. According to the intelligence she had received, there was at least one hidden expert among the people from number 60 high school, and it was impossible for them to all be indifferent salted fish. But given the current situation, the people from number 60 high didn't react at all. Could it be that the information was wrong? Madame Lavin frowned. She took out a remote control device that she had prepared in advance. That was the equipment that the senior standing behind her had given her in order to cooperate with the variety challenge this time. It was also known as the Expert Appraisal Remote Control. As long as she pressed the button, the 3 secret rooms in number 60 high school would enter power-up mode, and then something even more dangerous would happen. In a crisis, people often had to react to the impending danger, and they would definitely be able to see some clues. But if the 3 secret rooms were to power up at the same time, innocent people would definitely be implicated. Although Raven's objective was to test them, her original intention was just to ferret out that hidden expert. Thus, after thinking about it, Madame Lavin made a decision, and that was to test Wang Ling and Lotus Sun's secret room, which she was most suspicious of. With a kind expression on her face, she surreptitiously pressed the independent button on the Expert Appraisal remote control in her pocket. In the dark, 80-foot-wide secret room, the moment Madame Lavin pressed the button on the Expert Appraisal remote control, Wang Ling immediately sensed the abnormal change in the secret room. Although he and Lotus Sun still buried their faces in their knees and pretended to be afraid of the dark, Wang Ling abruptly opened his eyes in the darkness when this inexplicable pressure from beyond the heavens arrived. This was the aura of an ancient. It was the same aura as that of the sea demon layman whom Lotus Sun had encountered before. Back then, the sea demon layman had addressed that envoy from beyond the heavens as Holy Venerable. Behind that Holy Venerable stood an even bigger umbrella of protection, which was that legendary Holy King. Thus, in that instant, Wang Ling immediately realized that this ancient who had been sent by Raven to test them was most likely on Holy King's side. Wang Ling sighed deeply. He hadn't wanted to make a move at first. But this Expert Appraisal remote control was really a little difficult. And most importantly, this ancient was much more powerful than that sea demon layman whom Wang Ling had sent to deal with Lotus Sun previously. If Lotus Sun were to deal with this, it might be a little out of line. What kind of ancient being was this? It was a snow-white skeleton in a black cloak. Its eyes were hollow and deep, as if they could suck people into an exiled era, and it was much more powerful than Li Xian and Zhang Ziqin. This was an ancient with an immortal body. Wang Ling judged that this ancient wasn't human, but a member of the undead race, a rare race that had once appeared in the universe. Judging from the aura this snow-white skeleton gave off, it was very likely that this person was a king of the undead race. And so, in the darkness, this new Eternal One appeared in front of Wang Ling. Almost immediately, Wang Ling snapped his fingers. Time froze in the entire universe at the same time. Only he and this king of the undead race could move. Then, he patted the dust off his butt, stood up from the ground, and stood in front of Lotus Sunday. "It's you?" It was obvious that this ancient of the undead race was a little surprised. It had never expected Wang Ling to be the person who had been hiding all this time. Chapter 1814. The undead were said to be immortal, but that wasn't the case. They were born with long lifespans, and could live for a very long time without the need to cultivate. Wang Ling had taken Lotus Sun to the immortal star before, which was in fact a fragment of the immortal star where the undead lived. Wang Ling knew very little about the undead, and only heard that they had died back then because of a disaster caused by their longevity. In order to live longer, the outer gods had forcibly captured these snow-white skeletons as food in an attempt to break down the undead's natural genes and increase their lifespan in the world. Thus, in theory, the undead had been eaten up. Wang Ling looked at the snow-white skeleton in front of him in a black cloak, a red light flowing in his king's eye. This was an undead that had already matured, and was much more powerful than the average ancient one. In the eyes of many ancient ones, it was simply unbelievably strong. But most of the undead didn't live to this age at all, and were dissolved in the stomachs of other races. Sometimes, a long maturation period could be very troublesome, because as they grew up, they could be targeted by villains at any time and become their food. "I've never seen an earthling like you." Perhaps it hadn't expected Wang Ling to be the hidden ancient one that the holy king behind it had been looking for all this time, but after staring at Wang Ling for a long time, the snow-white skeleton spoke unhurriedly. In fact, it had been using its own method to repeatedly investigate Wang Ling's true identity. In the end, when it discovered that the youngster in front of it really was just a standard earthling, the astonishment that hadn't stirred up the slightest ripple for thousands of years suddenly shook the calm lake in its heart. Not only was he an earthling, he was also a terrifying one. In addition to being born with extremely long lifespans, the undead also had a pair of deeply sunken eye sockets. Even without the use of eye techniques, these eye sockets, which seemed to contain the eternal stars, still had the terrifying ability to see through everything. If a regular cultivator looked at it for a long time, they would definitely be stuck in the eye world of its eye sockets and be unable to extricate themselves. It would feel as if their souls had taken off and been drawn into the universe. When that time came, it would be time for the undead to reap their harvest. But at that moment, Wang Ling was standing in front of him, staring at him with those red eyes that he couldn't see through. The youth's eyes looked ordinary at first glance and there was nothing strange about them. However, after the skeleton prince of the undead clan observed them for a while, he suddenly felt his body lighten. Soon after, the surrounding space was no longer in the secret room, but had been swept into a vast sea of stars. "I'm suffering from a backlash?" The skeleton prince had never seen such a situation before. He, a king of the undead race, had actually lost to an earthling. Instead, it was his soul that had entered someone else's eye-power world. What was even more frightening was that this youth's eye-force world was boundlessly vast. His eye-force world was at most the size of a solar system, but this youth's eye-force world was a universe of its own, boundlessly vast. How could an earthling be so strong? The undead skeleton prince could not understand. He seriously suspected that he had been cheated. That was not what the Lord under the Holy King Highness had told him when he found him. He only said that it was very likely that there was a hidden ancient one in number 60 High's team, and that Wang Ling needed to find out. But given the current situation, how was this a test? He was about to lose his life. This was his first instinct as the undead prince, and he immediately sensed that Wang Ling was a very dangerous existence. But as a prince of the undead, he still had that last bit of stubborn dignity. Even though he knew that he couldn't beat Wang Ling, he still had to fight back. As Li Xian and Zhang Zidi had said before, there had been a lot of forces and races in the universe in the immemorial age, but most of them had actually looked down on the Ancient One. Over time, a chain of contempt had formed. Like the undead, they had been despised by the old ones, and had even been reduced to food for the outer gods. In the immemorial age, they had carried out the "undead are precious" movement every day, shouting slogans to protest against discrimination and suppression. In the end, they had turned around and inflicted the old ones' rudeness on the rest of the races. It was said that time was a cycle. Wang Ling felt that this was very reasonable. This was because this phenomenon still existed in the modern cultivation world. Earthling, don't come over. I may have entered your I-Force world, but I'm not afraid of you. If I self-destruct here, you'll be blinded in at least one eye. The skeleton prince threatened Wang Ling as he tried to negotiate with him. At the same time, Wang Ling could sense the restlessness of the other party's unyielding heart beneath the black cloak. It was an azure flame that symbolized the heart of the undead, and this skeleton prince's heart was extremely resplendent. He secretly channeled spirit energy as he watched Wang Ling vigilantly. A few seconds later, a prayer bead strung together from several small skulls suddenly flew out from under his black cloak. In an instant, the godly might of the skull prayer bead erupted, and spirit energy surged as it swallowed up all the starlight in the sky. Like a gluttonous snake that had suddenly invaded this world, the powerful spirit power sucked countless stars into its body. Boom! The moment the skull prayer bead erupted, it produced an extremely terrifying power of disillusionment and opened up an immortal small world, which was like a small island isolated from the rest of the world in Wang Ling's I-Force world. Wang Ling nodded to himself. To be able to open up another world in his I-Force world to resist external pressure was already very impressive. This world had been created by the skeleton prince using the prayer beads in his hand. In the current environment, it was like a submarine entrenched in the depths of the ocean, and was at risk of being crushed by the water pressure at any moment. Wang Ling didn't use any force, and just waited to see when the skeleton prince's isolated island would collapse. After a silent count of about 8 seconds. Sure enough. There was another loud boom. The newly formed island collapsed in a very short period of time. Wang Ling didn't wait any longer. A beam of light wrapped around his fingers, and with a light squeeze, the entire island collapsed in front of his eyes. At the same time, he lightly crooked his index finger, and the skeleton prince's prayer beads betrayed him in public as they directly flew into Wang Ling's palm. Give it back. At that moment, the skeleton prince was furious. Although this prayer bead wasn't the most powerful magic treasure he had, it was of great significance. Because each string of skulls on the prayer beads was formed from the skulls of each of his blood relatives, and was a very powerful magic treasure. It was just that he never expected that this prayer bead, which had been created with his blood relatives as the foundation, would actually be unable to resist the temptation of Wang Ling's outstretched finger, and directly fall into his hand. He couldn't help but spit out blood at the feeling of being betrayed. Chapter 18:15. At this point, the skeleton prince clearly understood that there was no chance of winning if he used head-on methods to deal with the youth in front of him. This youth from Earth was too strange. There was something strange about him that he had never seen before, giving him an indescribable feeling of strangeness. He did not know what he ate to grow up to be so powerful. He thought of a very strange primordial one, who was also a miraculous genius who once had the power to control the universe. Unfortunately, this genius had overestimated his own strength before he matured and tried to challenge the outer god palace. In the end, he was swallowed by the palace and never returned. Facing Wang Ling now, the skeleton prince had reason to believe that Wang Ling was the reincarnation of that legendary genius from back then. King of all phases. Li Luo. At that moment, he stared at Wang Ling and asked tentatively. Li Luo? Wang Ling frowned slightly, and very quickly remembered this person. Because according to the list of corpses that Zhang Zidong and Li Xian had compiled, there was indeed a skeleton called Li Luo in the supreme corpse winding up painting that Wang Ling had. Back then, Dao ancestor Wang had barged into the outer deity palace and rescued him from a narrow escape. When he was rescued, all that was left of Li Luo was an incomplete skeleton. He was also one of the few ancient people with broken limbs in the corpse burial painting. Wang Ling didn't know why the skeleton prince would equate this ancient being, who had once been called the king of 10,000 forms, with himself, but looking at the other party's misunderstood expression, it wasn't hard to guess that this snow-white skeleton in front of him had some kind of misunderstanding. I know that I won't be able to defeat you head-on. However, I still have other ways to deal with you, said the skeleton prince. With the last bit of his strength, he condensed a large amount of spiritual energy, causing the void around him to distort. At this moment, the pure white finger bone was dismantled with a crack, and then suddenly shot forward with a swoosh. This was a human bullet created from his finger bone. Its speed was extremely fast and spirit light surged. It swept up a huge spirit pattern wave in the air and rushed into the clouds. Wang Ling didn't move, because he could tell that this human bullet wasn't aimed at him. The skeleton prince's target wasn't him, but, I know it's very despicable to use such methods in a duel. But now, as long as he could win, there was no harm in being a little despicable. If you want to ensure the safety of the girl beside you, I advise you not to resist. The skeleton prince spoke coldly, but the finger bone he shot out was aimed at Lotus Sunday. At this time, Lotus Sun was in a motionless state due to the effect of the time stop. In fact, the moment the skeleton prince had appeared, he had already secretly set up a spatial passage in the narrow secret room that was aimed directly at Lotus Sunday. Even if he was pulled into another space later, he could use this space passage to directly use Lotus Sun as a hostage to blackmail Wang Ling. This idea was perfect in the skeleton prince's eyes. But the truth was that the skeleton prince didn't expect that the moment he set up the space passage, Wang Ling had already thought of a way to protect Lotus Sunday. Hence, he didn't listen to the skeleton prince's orders at all as he walked toward the skeleton prince step by step. Don't come over. Don't touch me. The skeleton prince shouted, but when he saw that the youngster still had no intention of stopping, he panicked on the spot and looked at Wang Ling in disbelief. You really don't care if this girl lives or dies? Forget it. I'll just kill this woman first. Even if I die, I'll drag her down with me. At that moment, with a thought, the finger bone he had shot out earlier suddenly pierced through the space passage and stabbed forward. However, this incomparably sharp shackle, which was beyond the understanding of Earth cultivators, was blocked by a glowing red shield of light that matched the color of Wang Ling's eyes. The skeleton prince controlled the finger bone from a distance. He first exerted force, but in the end, he wasn't able to penetrate the shield that Wang Ling had put on Lotus Sunday. Seeing that Wang Ling was still slowly approaching him, the skeleton prince panicked on the spot. You, if you have the guts, stand still and let this king break your shield first. I don't believe that I can't even break your shield. It's no use. Wang Ling thought in his heart. He sighed softly and stopped to watch the skeleton prince's performance for the time being. At the same time, he felt that this skeleton prince was silly and adorable. He clearly knew that he wasn't Wang Ling's match, but still insisted on using this kind of threatening method to deal with him. At that moment, the expression on the skeleton prince's snow-white bones as he used all his strength to try and break the shield was hilarious. Even his bones were covered in a layer of red. This was a stab that he had mustered all his strength to stab downwards. In the end, his fingertips directly spun on the shield like a drill bit at a super high speed. This was an astonishing speed. It reached 1 trillion times in 1 second. He concentrated all his damage on one point in the shield, trying to use the most powerful pressure to shatter Wang Ling's spirit energy shield. Finally, after trying hard for about 5 minutes, the skeleton prince saw the light. He finally saw it. He stabbed a small hole in the shield, and very quickly, the crack spread out in all directions like a spider web. It's broken. It finally broke. The skeleton prince was so excited that he cried tears of joy. His fingertips had been rubbed flat, and he had used all his strength to finally see the broken shield. But at the same time, he felt a new sense of despair. Because he realized that there was actually another shield layer behind this one, so it's a multi-layered shield. The skeleton prince scratched his head. He didn't fight Wang Ling, and instead directly fought the shield head-on, unable to extricate himself from breaking it. He looked at Wang Ling fiercely. If I don't break all your shields today, I won't have the face to continue living in this cultivation world. Wang Ling opened his mouth and tried to persuade the skeleton prince. You don't have to persuade me. I've made up my mind. You don't have to worry about me getting in the way. I'll make my finger bones invisible later. Those earth cultivators won't be able to see my existence with their magic power and surveillance equipment. Once I break all your shields, I'll fight you again, the skeleton prince vowed to Wang Ling. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed endlessly in his heart. Looking at the stubborn skeleton prince, he really didn't know what to say. A normal multi-layered spirit energy shield would have dozens of layers at most. Because of the structure, the more layers a spirit energy shield was, the more spirit energy it would take to set it up, which was proportional to the consumption. A multi-layered shield often required the combined spirit energy of multiple cultivators to set it up. However, Wang Ling's spirit energy was inexhaustible. In addition, he had always been a steady person. So when he had set it up back then, he had directly covered Lotus Sun with 100 million layers. It was clear that the skeleton prince didn't realize the seriousness of the problem at that moment. Chapter 1816. Inside the space inside the king's eye, Wang Ling couldn't bear to lay a hand on skeleton prince for a moment as he watched him bury his head in the shield and work hard. Although he didn't have any flesh on his face and it was hard to tell what his expression was, his posture was truly one of single-mindedness, as serious as when Wang Ling was reviewing his homework. This seriousness wasn't fake, and Wang Ling could tell that this skeleton prince really intended to break through his 100 million shields. However, piercing through the shield was easier said than done. Wang Ling's style of doing things had always been steady. When he had set up the first layer of the shield, he had even cast a refresh spell. In other words, even if the skeleton prince managed to break through to the last level, if he didn't have a way to dispel his respawn incantation and chose to break through directly, he wouldn't be able to do so. Then, the shields that he had destroyed earlier, it will be refreshed. He could not bear to disturb the idiotic prince who was focused on breaking the shield, so he retreated from the king's eye and allowed the skeleton prince to continue his grand ambition. On the other side, the skeleton prince heaved a sigh of relief after seeing Wang Ling leave. In fact, the moment Wang Ling had taken his rosary beads, he had already clearly sensed the gap between their battle strength. Clashing head-on with Wang Ling at this time was tantamount to death. He was the last descendant of the undead clan, so he had to ensure his own survival first. Furthermore, as the last descendant, he was a member of the royal family. Therefore, it was impossible for him to surrender. Today's trending topic on the internet would never appear on him. Therefore, as a descendant of the undead tribe's royal family, the skeleton prince's final stubbornness was to use his shield to divert attention. Now that Wang Ling was gone, the pressure on him had abruptly lessened. But he was also well aware that he absolutely couldn't stop working on this shield. Every moment he could drill through it could save his life. After returning to the cramped, damp, and dark secret room, Wang Ling realized that the finger bone which the skeleton prince had used to drill into Lotus Sun had really disappeared, but he could still see that it was still working very hard with his eye power. After curling his body back into the corner, he buried his head in his knees again, and with a snap, he secretly snapped his fingers to resume the flow of time. He had a great battle with the skeleton prince in the king's eye. In reality, it didn't take up much time in the real world. Madame Raven stared blankly at number 60 high school's secret room number 1, where there was still no progress. She clearly pressed the button just now. Why was there no movement at all? This button is fake? At this moment, Madame Lavin secretly gritted her teeth. When the senior handed the button to her, he clearly said that there were only 3 chances to test the button. Moreover, every time he pressed the button, he would summon a powerful primordial one to assist him. But she had clearly pressed it just now, so why wasn't there any reaction at all? Puzzled, Raven pressed the button a second time in the secret room where Lotus Sun and Wang Ling were. After sensing that the second ancient one was about to arrive, Wang Ling heard the familiar snap of his fingers again. The second immemorial one was a lion-headed half-beastman. It was also one of the races that had declined during the immemorial era. After seeing Wang Ling, this lion-headed half-orc's eyes were clearly a little astonished. He looked at Wang Ling with a disdainful attitude. Although our bloodline has already declined, I can still recreate the glory of the immemorial Lion Emperor in front of you. The immemorial Lion clan paid particular attention to the power of bloodlines, so the moment this lion-headed man appeared, he sensed the aura of Wang Ling's earthling bloodline. Ordinary, mediocre, plain, low-level, these words instantly flashed through the lion-headed man's mind. But at the same time, he couldn't figure out why an earthling youngster could stand firm under his spiritual pressure and fight him head-on. Also, before this, there should have been other immemorial ones here, right? He remembered that the undead skeleton prince had clearly been summoned away. But why hadn't there been any aura left at the scene? Looking at the lion-headed man in front of him, Wang Ling sighed silently. Without saying anything else, he directly used the space of the king's eye to invite the lion-headed man in. Damn it, how can this earthling have such a trick? By the time the lion-headed man realized that he had been sucked into the space of the king's eye, it was already too late. He had a look of disbelief on his face. Because in the space of the king's eye, he saw the undead skeleton prince who had come in before him. What are you doing? The lion-headed man was stunned. Because this skeleton prince seemed to be trying very hard to drill into something in the space of the king's eye. Ha ha ha, you're here. Brother Lion. I'm breaking the shield. You don't understand. This shield is hard to break. This king has to break it today. The skeleton prince laughed. I think you're scared. You're the descendant of the undead's royal family. He's just an earthling, why are you so afraid? The lion-headed man snorted in an indifferent tone. Chi. In the next moment, the golden mane around his neck suddenly released a dazzling light like the sun. Each strand of the golden mane was strengthened to become a peerless sword that shot out in all directions. This was the most powerful force derived from his golden mane, and in a short period of time, it crisscrossed the universe with unstoppable sword chi. Countless stars were cut to pieces by the sword chi, and at the same time, an endless aura of primal chaos was released from each of the mane which had turned into sword light. In the end, these flying manes converged in the sky to form a golden nine-headed lion which fiercely lunged at Wang Ling. This was a terrifying scene as the golden nine-headed lion displayed its kingly posture in the air. Wang Ling could see that this was the ability of a Dharma manifestation armament, which could only be used by extremely powerful eternal ones. Dharma manifestation armament. As the name implied, after summoning one's Dharma manifestation, it would be strengthened again through powerful means, such as putting on a layer of armor. At that moment, this nine-headed lion's Dharma manifestation was covered in the golden mane of the lion-headed man, and it was armed to the teeth. Each strand of the golden mane had turned into an extremely tough and peerless sword which was stuck into the nine-headed lion's body, completely covering it like a hedgehog. Seeing this scene, Wang Ling instantly understood. Since it was a sword, then it would be easy. Sword, come, at that moment, his mind stirred. He directly summoned Jinka. He slashed forward. In one move, the sword fell 1,000 feathers, and the golden nine-headed lion collapsed on the spot. Chapter 18-17. When Jinka appeared, before he could launch a major attack, the golden nine-headed lion in space was stripped bare on the spot, and all its fur scattered in the air like a celestial maiden scattering flowers. How could this be? The lion man couldn't believe it. His Dharma idol armament had already been cultivated to the highest level, and was an extremely troublesome trump card for any of the ancient ones. But this youngster in front of him had directly neutralized it with a peachwood sword. What on earth was this peachwood sword? Staring at Jinka, the lion man tried to probe him with his spiritual senses, but it was blocked by an invisible barrier and then reflected back at him, directly hitting him in the face. Boom! It was a very powerful blow that shattered his nose on the spot and caused him to bleed profusely. How dare a mere earthling be so impudent? With a loud roar, he opened his mouth, and in the instant he raised his head, he multiplied. A huge lion head as heavy as a mountain spat out countless blades of light that cut through the air. This was the primordial void-rending slash, which combined spirit energy and primal chaos chi, and then blasted out the explosive energy directly from the lion man's mouth. Almost in the blink of an eye, the space in front of him was completely enveloped. With a loud roar, he opened his mouth, and in the instant he raised his head, he multiplied. A huge lion head as heavy as a mountain spat out countless blades of light that cut through the air. In a flash, the scene in front of Wang Ling was covered by countless blades of light. Like blades stabbing at Kushuan, these golden blades of light brushed past Wang Ling's clothes at an extremely fast speed. What surprised Wang Ling slightly was that version 3.0 of number 60 High's enlightened school uniform was actually torn in several places by this kind of attack. It looked like he would have to add a new version of the enchanted spell to the uniform. Wang Ling couldn't help sighing in his heart. It could only be said that this 9-headed lion was indeed a little stronger than he had thought. Previously, number 60 High's uniform had rarely been damaged. Hence, when Wang Ling was fighting an enemy, he had never thought of adding any kind of barrier to himself. After all, he had to give the other party a chance to see hope. If he gave himself 100 million layers of shields like lotus suns, this kind of visible despair would probably scare anyone away in an instant. Hence, Wang Ling had only worn this ugly and tattered uniform when he fought, and in the end, number 60 High's uniform had withstood the test every time. It had been a long time since the last time his school uniform was slashed. For Wang Ling, whether the school uniform was torn or not was a way to identify the strongest among the ancient ones. In order to protect his school uniform from further damage, Wang Ling held Jinka in his hand and split it into countless sword shadows in the air to contend with the blades of light that filled the sky. It was as if two meteor showers had collided, causing huge explosions in the universe. The battle had reached its climax. The lion-headed man roared, and his eyes were cold. When he opened his mouth, a pitch-black spear covered in strange spirit patterns shot out from his mouth. Like a dragon, the long spear was thousands of feet long and aimed directly at Wang Ling. This was the lion race's Lion Emperor Overlord Spear. This was a powerful weapon that had been passed down from generation to generation since the Lion clan had established themselves. Wang Ling was a little astonished to see the lion man brandish it in public. When all was said and done, Wang Ling was just a 17-year-old kid who hadn't seen a lot of things. Thus, he felt like he was visiting a museum for the first time when he saw many novel things. The Lion Emperor Overlord Spear was too long. The spear was like a dragon, piercing through from afar. The radius of the spear was at least 15 feet long. Everywhere it passed, the space would collapse. It directly caused the energy in the universe to explode, turning into a boiling ocean. Such a huge and astonishing momentum made Wang Ling realize that he had to take it seriously. Is he going to use that strange peachwood sword? The undead skeleton prince also watched this scene from a distance. In his heart, he hoped that the Lion Emperor's move would work. If he could defeat Wang Ling, his side would also be able to escape this abyss of suffering, and he wouldn't have to use his broken shield as an excuse to preserve his life. So at that moment, he looked in front of him out of the corner of his eye and determined that Wang Ling was likely to use that peachwood sword. But after thinking it over, Wang Ling just turned the blade and stabbed it into his back. Then, he took a deep breath and concentrated his strength on his index finger, pouring it all into a single point. When the bright red spirit power bubbled out of the youngster's index finger, Wang Ling used Immortal Guides the Way and aimed it at the giant Lion Emperor Overlord Spear. At this point, the undead skeleton prince and the Shi clan's lion man were dumbstruck by Wang Ling's maneuver. This was the Lion clan's Overlord Spear. The Lion clan's most powerful chaos weapon. A chaos weapon that had reached the 4th level of the light sequence. This youngster was actually only using his index finger to block it with pure physical strength. Was he still a normal human? Boom! The Lion Emperor Overlord Spear and Wang Ling's index finger collided, and in an instant, the sky exploded as the head of the Overlord Spear was directly destroyed by Wang Ling. The power of this index finger went straight for the yellow dragon, and fine cracks began to spread from the spearhead to the end of the spear, which was hundreds of feet long. At the same time, the lion man let out a blood-curdling scream. He spat out a mouthful of blood, blue veins popping out all over his body, and his face turned pale from the pain. As the Lion Emperor Overlord's spear completely collapsed, he couldn't withstand the tremendous destructive power of the backlash from this clan treasure at all. After tumbling in the void of space for a good while, he crawled up from the ground covered in blood. Although he hadn't died directly, the strength of the backlash just now had already made him realize that he was no longer able to resist Wang Ling. This Earth youngster was too terrifying. He wasn't just a mascot like the information had said at all. It was only then that the Lion Man realized what on earth had happened to this undead skeleton prince, who had been on the side breaking the shield the whole time. It turned out that he had known all along that he couldn't beat Wang Ling, which was why he had been slacking off here. At that moment, Wang Ling walked toward the Lion Man step by step with his hands in his trouser pockets, looking as relaxed as ever. His red eyes gave off an extremely strong sense of contempt, as if he didn't care about anything at all. The more the Lion Man looked at him, the more apprehensive he became. "I'm telling you, don't come over. If you have the guts, you can continue after we break the shield." He hurriedly took a few steps back and stood side by side next to the undead skeleton prince. Then, very skillfully, he pulled out his index finger and began to study how to break the shield together with the skeleton king. Wang Ling, this was already the second eternal one. Wang Ling really couldn't figure out why this group of people were so desperate to serve that holy king. What on earth had he promised these people? Now, there was only one left, right? At that moment, Wang Ling counted on his fingers. He had already used up 2 summoning opportunities on Raven's side, and he wondered what the last one would be like. Chapter 18:18. The situation was worse than the Lion Man had imagined. Just a few breaths ago, he had been ridiculing this idiot skeleton prince of the undead for slacking off under the guise of breaking the shield. In the end, he had also touched it. It couldn't be helped. The main thing was that Wang Ling was too strong. He had complete control of the inner universe of the King's Eye, and possessed unparalleled might. His Lion Emperor Overlord Spear. It was a level 4 clan guarding chaos magic treasure. It had been destroyed by this youngster with one finger. This was such terrifying strength that the Lion Man's scalp went numb for a moment. Thus, he had no choice but to settle for the next best thing, and use the same method as the skeleton prince of the undead. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. Moreover, both of them were extremely worried about what they would do if the shield was destroyed by them in the end. Hence, they tacitly went easy on each other. It looked like they were working hard to break the shield, but in fact, they were just slacking off. What should we do? At that moment, the 2 ancient beings trapped in the inner universe of the King's Eye were pondering the same question. They didn't remember what their original mission was at all. The Holy Venerate sent by the Holy King had asked them to find the expert hidden in number 60 high and bring his soul back. They were to plant a magic treasure similar to a parasitic seed in his body so that it could control his body. Before they had been sent here, both of them had been full of confidence that they were up to the task this time. After all, one of them was a prince of the undead, and the other was the current leader of the Lion clan. Although these 2 clans no longer had any other clansmen, they had both inherited the royal bloodline. With the power of this bloodline, on paper, they were much stronger than most of the ancient beings. They could instantly kill most of the skeletons in the Supreme Corpse winding up diagram. Naturally, dealing with the Blood Lotus female butcher who had defeated Householder Sea Demon wouldn't be a problem either. But while their plan was good, it was very difficult to carry it out. It was like the product departments of some companies who always came up with unrealistic ideas and fancy operations. Programmers often pulled their hair out when they carried out their tasks. Another example was the withered authors who yelled all day that they wanted to add more chapters. Before they started writing, they confidently said that they would turn the world upside down, but when it came time to write, the world made them obedient. As it turned out, there was always a difference between ideas and practice. In fact, Wang Ling hadn't expected the 2 ancient beings of the royal bloodline to be so afraid of him. But what did they say? That they could cut through his school uniform. He had to give them credit where it was due. From the beginning, he hadn't intended to kill these two people. After all, they were descendants of the royal family, and all of them were ancient ones. They knew as much as Li Xian and Zhang Zizi. So from the very beginning, his goal had been to capture the two of them alive like pet elves, then lock them up in the corpse picture for domestication. The primordial ones were the oldest branch of human cultivation civilization. Since Dao ancestor Wang intended to preserve them, he must have his own reasons. Furthermore, Wang Ling firmly believed that in the end, he would have to start with these ancient ones when it came to creating a talisman that could limit the energy in his body once and for all. Prince of them was, of that of Wang, Emperor of Gu, he of Wang. Prince of, in the world of the Venerate would gradually adapt to modern cultivation civilization under certain constraints, and in the end, turn them into his own power in case of an emergency. This was like creating a game world. Wang Ling could be the main god of this game world, and let the Venerate build their own homes, establish their own sects, and revive the glory of their clan back then. Finally, the benefits would be distributed according to how much each Venerate contributed to this world. In any case, Wang Zhibao had an inexhaustible supply of magic treasures, and any one of them would be enough for the Venerate to fight over. So under the premise of a clear system, the benefits would be distributed according to how much they contributed, and no one would have any objections. But Wang Ling also knew that it wouldn't be easy to realize this idea. First of all, he had to establish a trustworthy management team with him as the core, which would have prestige among the Venerate. Li Xian and Zhang Ziqin were his trusted aides, so they were naturally his first choice. But it would be hard to intimidate them with just their strength. Thus, he needed descendants of the royal family like the Skeleton Prince and the Lion Man in front of him to play supporting roles. But just two descendants of the royal family seemed a little lacking, so he just needed to poach all the Venerate on Holy King's side. After 2 rounds of duels, Wang Ling realized that Holy King seemed to have a hobby of collecting descendants of the royal family, and that 2 Venerate in a row were members of the royal family. Then, who would be the third person to arrive? Wang Ling was very curious. Following his previous routine, Wang Ling temporarily lifted the time-stop effect. When Madame Raven saw that Wang Ling still had his face buried in his knees on the monitor screen, she almost went crazy. Why is this person still squatting in there and acting cute? Why isn't there any reaction at all when she presses the remote control? Damn, this button isn't fake, right? Didn't they say they would send strong reinforcements? Why isn't there any reaction at all? Can anyone control this person? She only had one last chance to press the button. But her fingers couldn't help moving. In a very short period of time, she pressed the button countless times with da-da-da-da sounds. Then, the time-stop effect was activated again. Because Wang Ling could sense that a third Venerate had arrived. Just as he had thought, this Venerate really did have the royal bloodline. This was beyond Wang Ling's expectations. The third Venerate was a female Venerate. Dressed in a gorgeous glass robe, she looked like a fairy of the 9th heaven who had descended from the heavens as she appeared in front of Wang Ling with countless 7-colored petals. It's actually Meng Liuli. The undead Skeleton Prince and the Lion Man were both shocked the moment the woman appeared. They had never expected Meng Liuli, the famous dream manipulator among the Venerates, to actually serve the Holy King. Unlike the Skeleton Prince and the Lion Man, after realizing that she had been sucked into the king's eye's internal space, this woman called Meng Liuli wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, she fixed her gaze on Wang Ling and said, "You're actually willing to put so many shields on that girl outside. She must be very important to you. Whether you want to admit it or not." She looked at Wang Ling, then changed her face to look like Lotus Sunday. "Shields are ineffective against me." Meng Liuli smiled. "Right now, I am her. She is me. If you hit me, all the pain and injuries will be concentrated on that girl." Chapter 18-19. An illusion spell? Wang Ling frowned slightly. Or rather, this wasn't a simple illusion spell, but a clone spell that was very similar to a real clone, except that the target wasn't the caster, but a designated person. Meng Liuli knew that Wang Ling wouldn't be easy to deal with, so she had extracted some of Lotus Sun's spirit energy, and then used a super strong imitation ability to quickly assimilate the spirit energy surging through her body with Lotus Sun's spirit energy to form a shell around her body. In this way, she had taken on Lotus Sun's appearance. This was a brilliant spell technique, which Meng Liuli called Moonlight Knight's Oath, or Knight's Oath for short. It was an extremely brilliant technique that involved the assimilation of soul, clone, and spirit energy at the same time, and could only be done by an ancient being who was completely proficient in this type of spell. The most important thing was that by doing this, one could indeed ignore the influence of the external shield, and directly start to break down from the inside. Meng Liuli was full of confidence in the method she had used. She had come to rescue the skeleton prince and the lion man, but after threatening Wang Ling, she looked at the two people behind her out of the corner of her eye and saw that they were still focused on breaking the shield, as if they had already completely given up on resisting. She even received disdainful taunts from the skeleton prince and the lion man out of the corner of their eyes. They mocked Meng Liuli for being too young. They didn't understand how dangerous the youngster in front of them was. The look in their eyes was clearly telling her that these techniques were child's play in front of Wang Ling, and that she should quickly give up on resisting and stop struggling pointlessly. At that moment, Meng Liuli grit her teeth, summoned a glass dagger, and stared at Wang Ling. As the princess of the Dream Clan, today I will show you my power. Wang Ling, despite her arrogance, Wang Ling could tell that the glass dagger she had summoned wasn't a dagger to stab him, but a dagger that Meng Liuli had used to come from Remnant. After this miraculous assimilation was completed, all the pain would be reflected back on Lotus Sun, so Meng Liuli naturally wasn't afraid of getting hurt. The next moment, she clenched her teeth, grabbed the hilt of the dagger, and stabbed it deep into her thigh. Meng Liuli couldn't wait to see Lotus Sun's pained expression. She imagined the moment she stabbed her knife in, blood spurting out of Lotus Sun's slender, snow-white thigh. However, it turned out that she was thinking too much. As soon as the knife stabbed down, the lion-headed man on the back let out a heart-wrenching scream. A clear cut appeared on the lion-headed man's leg where the shield had been broken. A glazed light seeped through the wound and went straight through the meridians, continuously destroying the insides of the lion-headed man. "Ah, you're such a self-righteous person." The lion man roared with a pained expression, and the profanities he cursed turned into asterisks as if he was sending a telegram. Only now did Meng Liuli realize that Lotus Sun, who had signed the Moonlight Knight's Oath with her, had turned into a lion's head. Had it been transferred? Meng Liuli immediately realized that the injury had been transferred. After she and Lotus Sun had signed the assimilation contract, an external force had helped Lotus Sun and the lion-headed man carry out a second assimilation contract, which was why it was actually the lion-headed man who had been injured when Meng Liuli stabbed him. And the only person present who could do this was the youngster in front of her. Meng Liuli was shocked. The spell she had been studying for so long had actually been directly learned by the other party in just a few short moments, and it seemed that he was even more proficient than she was. After he had seen through the Moonlight Knight's Oath, Meng Liuli realized that there was no point in continuing to use this move. No wonder the two kings of the Ancient Ones had looked at her like that. There was indeed something strange about this Earth youngster, and he wouldn't be easy to deal with. Threatening him head-on wouldn't work, and Meng Liuli felt that if she wanted to tame this youngster, she had to use some other methods. Thus, after dispelling the effects of the Moonlight Knight's Oath spell, Meng Liuli raised both hands at Wang Ling and slowly walked toward him. In a tender voice, she said, "This little brother. I, the princess of the Dream Clan, will never listen to anyone. You're very strong. Do you want to join me in reviving the royal clan? I'm willing to be yours." She said this to Wang Ling with sincerity. Failing to threaten him, Meng Liuli could only sell him something else. Furthermore, she had always believed that this move would definitely work on Wang Ling. When all was said and done, he was a hot-blooded youngster. No normal man would be able to withstand this kind of attack. As she walked toward Wang Ling, she untied her belt so that her fair skin was faintly discernible under the transparent glass robe. The blood on the lion-headed man's leg hadn't stopped yet, and instantly surged even more violently. However, the expression on Wang Ling's face didn't change at all. It was true that he was a hot-blooded youngster, but that didn't mean that he would be in front of Mang Lioli. As the princess of the Dream Clan, Mang Lioli was naturally a very beautiful woman. Graceful and beautiful, she was like a dazzling seven-colored gem. She still maintained her youthful appearance. This kind of appearance was like that of a goddess who had walked out of a painting. Any man could only describe it as pleasing to the eye. Unfortunately, Mang Lioli's appearance couldn't be maintained if Wang Ling used the slightest bit of his power of sight. Although Mang Lioli had tried her best to maintain her appearance with all kinds of beauty-preserving spells and elixirs, in Wang Ling's eyes, as long as the king's eye was active, she would look like an old woman who had lived through the ages. At that moment, Mang Lioli, who was gracefully walking toward Wang Ling in the eyes of the skeleton prince and the lion-headed man, was an old woman with loose skin, a face full of age spots, and a face full of wrinkles. It wasn't that Wang Ling hadn't seen beautiful girls before, but he certainly wasn't that hot-blooded in the face of an old woman. Thus, he didn't say anything, and only took out his enchanted phone. After casting a spell of the king's eye, he took a picture of Mang Lioli's true appearance. Wang Ling knew that it might be a little cruel for a woman to do this, but people always had to face their truest selves. Without another word, he directly used the king's eye to launch a spiritual spell visual projection, and projected the image of Mang Lioli he had just taken into the air. This was a public execution of Mang Lioli, and at that moment, it was very clear. Mang Lioli couldn't take it anymore. The corners of her mouth twitched as she stared at the aged face projected in the air, and her expression instantly changed. Chapter 1820. The king's eye's ability to separate the fake from the real was astonishing. After removing all the beauty and youthful effects, even Mang Lioli herself couldn't accept her ugly appearance. As an ancient, all the signs of aging were reflected in Mang Lioli at that moment, as if she had entered her twilight years. Then, Wang Ling could clearly sense that Mang Lioli had shut herself off as she crouched down in the air, hugging her head and looking like she was in great pain. At this point, the three ancient beings who had been sent by Madame Raven had all been dealt with. For some reason, Wang Ling felt that this wasn't enough, and that there was a sense of emptiness. But when he thought about it carefully, his harvest this time wasn't small. At least 3 ancient beings with royal bloodlines had become pawns in his subsequent plans. All that was left was for the Holy King behind him to take action. This was the final boss-level character. Although Wang Ling currently didn't know what relationship this Holy King had with Baizhi, from the looks of it, they weren't on the same side. The resources of the ancient beings under Holy King's control were very heaven-defying, and the trump cards he had were far more than just the 3 royal beings trapped in the king's eye space. He probably wouldn't show up so easily before he used up all his trump cards. Since that was the case, Wang Ling felt that there was no harm in comparing their trump cards. The trump cards in the hands of the Holy King were gathered through continuous lobbying. But Wang Ling was different. As long as he wanted to, he could have more trump cards at any time. But he didn't have any. He could also create trump cards. Leave the rest to me. At this time, Wang Ying appeared, directly materializing from a black shadow. His hair was white, and his face was like a face. The 3 eternal ancient kings were shocked when they saw him. Wang Ling nodded and took over Wang Ying, then voluntarily withdrew from the king's eye space. At that moment, the skeleton prince, the lion man and Mang Lioli stared at Wang Ying, who had suddenly appeared, and they couldn't help feeling fear in their minds again. They had a hunch. That was that this white-haired youngster in front of them was more difficult to deal with than the black-haired one. He was a ruthless character who wasn't easy to negotiate with. All of you, stop. Don't use the shield as an excuse. You don't want to break it at all, you just want to live. If he wanted to destroy you, why would my master waste so much effort? Wang Ying crossed his arms and said with a sinister smile, "Don't worry, I'm much easier to talk to than my lord. As long as you surrender, I won't do anything to you. We are the royal family." "How is it possible?" The lion-headed man was the first to speak. He wanted to curse out loud, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. he didn't dare to be so arrogant in front of Wang Ying. He could tell that Wang Ying was a ruthless character. If he was not careful, his head would fall to the ground. But aren't you all still serving the Saint King? As a member of the royal family, you already have no dignity to talk about. Wang Ying said. This is a contract. All three of us are the same. At that moment, the skeleton prince could not help but interject. We're just abiding by the contract. There's no superior or inferior relationship. That's just the boss's workplace PUA. Wang Ying heard that and suddenly laughed. Although he had already confirmed that the Holy King's faction had nothing to do with Bai Zhe, the method of tricking his subordinates into working for him was shockingly similar. Bai Zhe and the dragon descendants led by Jing Zhe used the exact same excuse. To outsiders, it sounded very shameless. But this method was able to keep the employees who had been successfully painted like a pie in the sky. This was a normal operation in business management. It was commonplace in the eyes of capitalists. But Wang Ling's business model was different. Because he had too many things in his king's treasure pants to count, the things he could promise wouldn't be painted like a pie in the sky, nor would it lead to bourgeois antagonism and exploitation. That was right. Wang Ling's ultimate goal was exactly what he had envisioned at the very beginning. He wanted to create an eternal utopia in the supreme shrouded corpse painting. Everyone would be equal, and they would be distributed according to their contribution to the world. The big ball would lead the small balls, and some areas would become rich first, and then ultimately achieve common prosperity. Between the tangible rich rewards and the illusory pie, any smart person would be able to figure out the choice. So, when Wang Ying brought up the idea of having the skeleton prince, the lion-headed man and Meng Liuli build the eternal world, the expressions in their eyes instantly changed. Their expressions showed that it was actually possible to do this. Building a utopia that was made up entirely of ancient beings was the vision that the three descendants of the royal family had once yearned for. The key was that they would be able to obtain visible rewards with just contribution points while ensuring that there were sufficient resources. They would only need to focus on building their homes, and there would be no need to engage in various tribal wars for resources like in the past. When everyone was rich, it would finally be a perfect cultivation communist society. Although your vision is beautiful, it's also a question of whether it can really be realized. Everyone knows how to paint a pie in the sky, said the skeleton prince. At that moment, Wang Ying nodded slightly. He stared at the people in front of him with a very serious expression. So, do you want to take a look? Look at what? King's treasure pants. Wang Ying said confidently, that's where all the resources in the universe are gathered. No one has a stronger foundation than Lord Ling. After leaving the king's eye space, Wang Ling resumed the flow of time. At the same time, he realized that it was time to solve the problem at hand. There was no point in continuing to waste time in this secret room. Even Lotus Sun herself hadn't expected that in the blink of an eye, Wang Ling would have already dealt with the three eternal people of the royal family. She was a little puzzled. It was a kind of sixth sense, and she felt that she had missed something while she had been burying her face in her knees. And most importantly, she had a vague intuition that something seemed to be poking at her from the outside. At that moment, Wang Ling stole a glance at her out of the corner of his eye, and was stunned to find that the finger bone from the skeleton prince was actually still drilling into her shield. F***K. Just how obsessed was this guy with this broken shield? Hadn't Wang Ying already taken them to see the king's treasure pants? Why was she still here breaking the shield? At that moment, the corner of Wang Ling's mouth twitched. He didn't know how to explain this to Lotus Sun, and could only stare awkwardly at the invisible finger bone that the skeleton prince had left behind. Wang Ling? Seeing that Wang Ling was looking at her strangely, Lotus Sun's eyes were a little puzzled. She suddenly raised her head, but the finger bone that had been drilling into the shield slipped out as Lotus Sun's posture changed, and smashed the door of the secret room in front of them. What the hell? Why is there suddenly a hole in the room where Student Wang and Student Sun are staying? In the studio, several cameramen stared at the image on the monitor, their faces twitching in shock. Chapter 1821. Madame Raven hadn't expected this outcome at all. The reason she had set up the secret room was to use this design to draw out the dark side of these young people's hearts. Raven had always thought that there wasn't much to look at when watching variety shows, and that it was more interesting to scheme and pull each other's hair. But all this turned to dust when Wang Ling and Lotus Sun's team broke through the secret room first. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but Madame Raven felt like there was an invisible electric drill that she couldn't see clearly. Otherwise, there was no way to explain how Wang Ling and Lotus Sun had been able to break through the secret room so easily. Should we test it? I feel like there's a problem, a program producer said doubtfully. No need, let's leave it at that for now. Madame Raven dropped her forehead into her hand. She now had reason to believe that it was because of the 3 buttons she had pressed earlier. If this invisible electric drill had really come from the seniors she had summoned, then it was very obvious that it had been aimed at Wang Ling and Lotus Sun from the very beginning. But unfortunately, there had been a mistake. As a result, the electric drill had directly helped Wang Ling and Lotus Sun's team break through the secret room. This was an attack from the immemorial ones. 2 high school students had actually dodged it. Madame Raven's eyes widened, and she felt that this was inconceivable. In the end, she still felt that she had underestimated Wang Ling, number 60 High's mascot. The huge commotion alarmed everyone in the surrounding secret rooms. In the secret room where Li Yuyue and Fang Xing were, Fang Xing, who seemed to have been waiting for a signal, suddenly opened his eyes. Looks like it's time to make a move, Fang Xing said with a calm and confident expression on his face. To be honest, when she had been locked up with Fang Xing, Li Yuyue had always felt that he was a little unfamiliar. He wasn't that sunny man who always wore a smile on his face in class. Compared with his usual appearance, Fang Xing's every movement was filled with a sense of mystery, and he was unfathomable and unfathomable. Li Yuyue had always thought that Fang Xing had been silent because he was looking for a way to escape. In the end, she hadn't expected him to stand up on the spot, as if he had received some sort of signal when he heard the commotion. He stretched out his index finger, looking as if he had a strategy in hand. When a white spiritual energy bloomed from the tip of his finger, it was as if he had everything under control. Wang. His index finger actually turned into a small steel snake, which directly drilled into the keyhole. Li Yuyue was a little dazed. Fang Xing, what spell is this? Fang Xing smiled. It's just a trick I learned from my father, it's not worth mentioning. I see. Li Yuyue nodded. Although we're in the same class, I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time today. Do you feel this way? Fang Xing smiled awkwardly. Looking steadily ahead, he continued to use his own method to focus on unlocking the device. Yeah, I feel a little different from the usual you. But he couldn't tell. You'll feel more attractive this way. Li Yuyue laughed and couldn't help but gossip, but you've received quite a lot of love letters. I don't have to worry about you like I do Rongrong. Yes. Fang Xing nodded, then hesitated before saying, actually. I also have someone I care about a lot. Someone you care about? The kind you like? I don't know. Fang Xing thought for a bit, then shook his head and replied, I don't know if it's because I like him, or because I'm grateful, or because I've been conquered by his charisma. Indeed, if you directly confess before you're sure of your feelings, it might hurt both of you. Li Yuyue, who had specially studied love and was committed to playing the role of matchmaker, helped analyze the situation for Fang Xing. Actually, she rarely talked to Fang Xing in class. She had never thought that he would actually talk to her about this during this activity. Sure enough, participating in a competition and engaging in team building was indeed good for improving the bond between them. Fang Xing deliberately slowed down his movements. As he unlocked the door, he asked, also, I realized that my other friend also likes him very much. I've never been in the habit of stealing what other people like, so I don't know what to do until now. Do you think there's a chance between the two of them? Maybe, Fang Xing laughed bitterly. If he's really with me, maybe there won't be a result. Listening to these words, Li Yuyue's thoughts were in a mess. She felt that Fang Xing's situation, was far more complicated than Lotus Sun's. I'm sorry for talking to you about such trivial matters. After 10 seconds or so, Fang Xing suddenly said, the door's unlocked, I think we should go out. I hope you can help me keep what I said just now a secret and don't tell anyone. Okay. I understand. Li Yuyuan nodded. At the same time, Super Chen and Hero Guo were also at a loss over the matter of the lock. They had already tried all kinds of methods within their abilities, but in the end hadn't been able to break the shackles. Old Guo, if it really doesn't work, just cut off my hand with a saw, said Super Chen, ready to die a heroic death. Super Chen, listen to me, it won't. This is a variety show, not the real Saw. Hero Guo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There's always a way. We won't be the last one, right? I think I heard Wang Ling and Fang Xing's movements just now. It's not shameful to be last in number 60 high, but if we can't even beat the high school students in Glio City, that would be too shameful. Super Chen grit his teeth, his blood surging. I don't want to be the last one. Then he looked at Hero Guo. Don't you have a lot of uncles? Isn't there one in this variety show? He can help us unlock the door. Hero Guo was so angry that he laughed on the spot. What are you thinking? How could there be an uncle here? By the way, is it really not cheating to have someone from the show help us unlock the door? As soon as he said that, Super Chen and Hero Guo suddenly heard the sound of a key falling to the ground in the extremely quiet secret room. A glittering key seemed to have been thrown through a crack in the secret room. It landed directly at Super Chen's feet. It's a key. Super Chen was excited. Not only was there a key, Super Chen also noticed a ribbon tied to the back of the key. Using the light provided by the fireball spell on their fingertips, the two of them could clearly see the words written on the ribbon. Nephew Big, Uncle is here to save you. Quickly use the key to unlock the door. Hero Guo, ? Chapter 1822. The situation was instantly reversed. When Maelstrom Emperor Zhong, which had initially held the upper hand, suddenly fell into a disadvantageous position, Zhou Yun almost instantly sensed it. It was clear that Lavin's pressure had failed to force out the expert hidden inside number 60 high, so he could only do it himself now. Inside the yin-yang iron cage, Zhou Yun stared at Wang Muyu in front of him. He knew that this was the best target. If he wanted to lure out that hidden expert, he would have to make the child suffer a little first. He opened his hand, and a golden spirit rune spread out from his palm like a ripple. Then, it slowly spread toward Wang Muyu. As a member of the Heavenly Law Alliance, they weren't only good at using the Heavenly Law spear techniques. Mind control techniques were what the Heavenly Law Alliance's members mainly cultivated. Zhou Yun had already been very careful in casting the mind-manipulating spell. It was a diluted version of the spell, and he hadn't used his full strength. This was a spell that could control a person's mind for a short period of time. It was just that Zhou Yun had held back since the person he was dealing with was a child. If he directly used the undiluted version, Wang Muyu might be left with serious repercussions after the spell was lifted. But Zhou Yun hadn't expected that although he had clearly successfully cast the mind-manipulating spell, his mind connection with Wang Muyu hadn't truly been established. Strange, he was quite surprised, even if it was a diluted version. Even if it was a diluted version, it was just a child, how could his control fail? Zhou Yun frowned. Golden ripples surged in his palm as he unhesitatingly increased his strength in an attempt to control Wang Muyu. BZZT. In the next second, he felt that his mind-manipulating skill was reflected back by a force. At the same time, an illusion appeared in his mind. When he came back to his senses, he and Wang Muyu were no longer in the space they were in. His soul had been moved. Zhou Yun immediately reacted, and broke out in a cold sweat. He never thought that Wang Muyu would actually have this trick up his sleeve. He wasn't an ordinary primary school student. In a split second, Zhou Yun's soul had been moved to a brand new space. No ordinary person could do this. Not only that, Jillian also realized that the space he was in was very extraordinary. The mystical power of a dragon's breath swirled in the air, giving him a frightening feeling, as if he were looking at 10,000 dragons making a pilgrimage. Roar! A huge dragon's shadow appeared in the sky, overlooking the earth. This was the Dharma Laksana spirit that Wang Muyu had conjured, and it was incredibly majestic. Who the hell are you? Zhou Yun was utterly horrified. He had underestimated Wang Muyu, and at the same time felt that this truth was inconceivable. They had spent so much effort investigating which of the 6 people from No. 60 high was the hidden expert. In the end, he never thought that the primary school student in front of him was the hidden boss. Was it the immemorial one? Zhou Yun frowned. If it was an ancient being, Wang Muyu would probably be at the peak. Because he had already felt the difference in strength, and it was very obvious. Damn it, at the same time, Hisumo discovered that he could no longer move his body. In the distance, the roar of a dragon could be heard, as if it came from the other side. At this moment, in the depths of Wang Muyu's inner world, Ku Yun's soul was trembling. That silhouette of a dragon that flickered with myriad colors in the sky was simply too huge. Even though it was just a blurry silhouette, it was enough to make one feel suffocated. Who on earth are you? Staring at this scene, Hisumo felt like he had completely collapsed. He couldn't imagine Wang Muyu's true identity at all, even though he already had some guesses in his heart. As you can see, I'm a dragon, Wang Muyu said without hiding anything. He had moved Hisumo's soul into the inner world, and wasn't worried at all that Hisumo would tell others about it later. That was because he was sure that Hisumo would be mentally unstable after he left, and would also be so terrified that he would forget what had happened in the inner world. Heh! Hisumo was stupefied. His knees couldn't support his terror at all, and he collapsed on the spot. Dragon? What kind of joke was this? That was a creature that had already been extinct for tens of thousands of years, an existence that only appeared in legends. In the current cultivation world, it was impossible for a dragon to still be alive. At that moment, Hisumo was completely dumbfounded by Wang Muyu's revelation of his identity. That was to say, he wasn't actually facing an ancient being, but a dragon in human form. He felt like he was dreaming, and it felt very unreal. So you're the mastermind behind this? Hisumo's voice was trembling, and he couldn't believe this outcome. He thought that the Heavenly Law Union would definitely win this battle. In the end, he didn't expect a little dragon person to appear out of nowhere. Mastermind behind this? Hearing Hisumo's words, Wang Muyu squinted his eyes and smiled. I don't have that ability. Hearing that, Hisumo was even more horrified. Since you're not the mastermind behind this, that means you're being controlled by someone? This question made Wang Muyu think about it carefully, and he answered cautiously, I can't say that I'm being controlled. Right now, we're in a separate relationship. He calls me brother, and I call him father. Hisumo's mouth twitched. What the hell is this? Since you're a dragon, how can you recognize an earthling? So what if I'm an earthling? Don't look down on earthlings. Not all earthlings are as weak as you, Wang Muyu retorted with a displeased expression. He looked at Hisumo and shrugged. I thought that even if you weren't as outstanding as I imagined, you would at least be a qualified opponent. But when you were locked in the cage, I already sensed that you didn't even get a passing score, which disappointed me. If it wasn't for Dad also participating in this competition, I wouldn't even have to fight in a battle of this level. Hearing this, Hisumo's face turned slightly red, and he felt so ashamed that he wanted to find a hole to crawl into. His body trembled slightly as he suppressed his anger. Don't go too far. In the end, this earth is still the earth of earthling cultivators. It's not your turn to comment on human cultivators. Let me correct you. What I said just now wasn't a comment, it was pure contempt. Wang Muyu laughed. On this earth, apart from Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, Wang Wan, and the earthlings who were related to them, Wang Muyu had never taken any other earthling seriously from the beginning. At that moment, Hisumo stared at Wang Muyu with a crafty look in his eyes. Don't think that you're invincible. there's always someone better than you, is that so? Why didn't you say so earlier? I could have given you a chance to ask for help. Wang Muyu didn't care about Hisomo's trump card at all. Then, he withdrew the aura of the inner world and gave Hisomo a chance to catch his breath. Come on, call out your trump card. Let me see what kind of trash it is. Chapter 1823. Everything was going according to Wang Ling's plan. Jiu Yun, who had been suppressed by Wang Muyu, quickly sent a request for help as the leader of Heavenly Dao Alliance Team 2. It was no wonder that the only ones who dared to come and help Jiu Yun at this time were the collectors of the royal bloodline, which was the sacred race, led by the Holy King. However, neither the Heavenly Dao Alliance nor Jiu Yun had the right to speak directly to the sacred race, so they could only entrust an organization designated by the sacred race to convey the message. And this organization was the Tengu. What Jiu Yun hadn't expected was that Wang Ling was actually in control of the Tengu. This was because Levis had already become the new Supreme Pontiff, and the Supreme Pontiff was an 8-star Tengu, so he had the absolute right to speak in the Tengu organization and also had the right to speak to the sacred race. Thus, when Levis received Jiu Yun's request for help, he wasn't in a hurry to send reinforcements despite being the Supreme Pontiff. He hated the Heavenly Law Alliance, who tried to smooth things over, and he had wanted to teach them a lesson from the beginning. Hence, he had temporarily set aside Jiu Yun's request for help in an attempt to make Jiu Yun suffer a little more of the mental pressure and torment he felt when he faced off against Wang Muyu. There was nothing more joyous than watching someone put on a mask of pain. Of course, at the same time, Pei Luoqi and Mai Shi were also standing in front of him. The two of them stood respectfully in front of him with their eyes closed and their heads lowered, not daring to meet his gaze. They were as obedient as two grandsons and didn't dare speak at all. In order to shift the blame, the two of them had blamed the Supreme Pontiff's death on someone else. In the end, this Yuan Venerate Master was actually standing in front of them, completely unscathed. After ruling out the possibility of a fake corpse, the two of them tacitly began to secretly use their own methods to verify the Supreme Pontiff's identity. The Supreme Pontiff's cultivation level wasn't very high, so the two of them, who were already immortal venerates, had countless methods to verify the Supreme Pontiff's identity. They had originally thought that this Supreme Pontiff was an impostor, so they had confidently tried to unmask the Supreme Pontiff. Levis naturally knew what the two of them were thinking, so he had deliberately walked down to warm them up, giving them a chance to test him. However, Wang Wan's shadow film assimilation technique was so perfect that it was impossible for the two of them to break it. It's actually the Supreme Pontiff. Pei Luoqi and Mai Shi broke out in a cold sweat at the same time. The two of them had a guilty conscience. They had considered all the possibilities, but they never thought that the great Pope would really come back to life. Levis knew that the time was right when he saw the panic on their faces. The corners of his lips curled up as he followed the tone of the great Pope and said, "I know that the two of you have always had a problem with me. No, the two of us are loyal to the church. How could we have anything against the elder brother? Pei to chi pado to chi shi to their relationship. Pado pe to chiang to. Pen was to say, he to the Supreme Pontiff, pe to say." When Makaxi heard that Paluki was trying to curry favor with him, he naturally didn't want to be outdone. He hurriedly explained, "I don't know where Supreme Pontiff heard this news, but both of us have deep respect for the Supreme Pontiff. I don't know where the Supreme Pontiff got the news, but both of us respect the Supreme Pontiff." Pei Luoqi's mouth twitched. "What do you mean, Great General? Are you saying that I don't respect the Supreme Pontiff as much as you do? All these years, the Heavenly Dao Alliance has served the Church, mediated conflicts between different forces, and risked our lives. We have also helped you settle many things. Did the Supreme Pontiff forget about these things?" When Levis heard that, he was not in a hurry to speak. He tried his best to control his emotions, using his usual professionalism to hold back his laughter as he watched the two people below the stage begin to quarrel. Mai Shi said, "The Heavenly Dao Alliance is just an organization that tries to smooth things over. How can you brag about that? If not for the Supreme Pontiff's support, how many forces would be willing to give the Heavenly Tao Alliance such face? Pei Luoqi said, I wonder if the Supreme Pontiff dares to say the same thing to the Heavenly Tao Alliance's leader? Maishi chuckled. Why wouldn't I dare? Pei Luoqi said, the Heavenly Tao Alliance serves the Church. Hurting the Heavenly Tao Alliance's leader's heart is hurting the Church's heart, as well as the Supreme Pontiff's heart. You said earlier that you respect the Supreme Pontiff, but I feel that you don't care about him at all. Unlike me, who only cares about the Church's leader. Realizing that the topic was getting a little off track, Levis hurriedly cleared his throat and steered the conversation back to where he wanted it to be. Gentlemen, there's no need to argue anymore. I know that both of you are loyal to me. He stood up and gripped the cane that symbolized the Supreme Pontiff's authority as he said unhurriedly, I didn't call the two of you here to denounce you. I just wanted to remind you not to fall into a trap. A trap? What does the Supreme Pontiff mean? Pei Luoqi said. The two of you are quarreling here. May I ask who the biggest beneficiary is? Levis asked. The biggest beneficiary? Maishi frowned. One of the people who had something to do with this matter was Raven, and the other was Levis. Although Levis had been rescued by Battle's sect and had yet to be found, it was obvious that this sucker of a president of Scarlet Orchid Association wasn't directly related to the beneficiary. Thus, when Levis, who was pretending to be the Supreme Pontiff, said this, Pei Luoqi and Maishi instantly understood. Two words popped up in their minds at the same time. Raven. This extremely shrewd woman had been hiding in Glio City all these years to develop herself, using the name of a variety show producer to secretly recruit people. If there was a conflict between the two sides, the biggest beneficiary would naturally be none other than Raven. I knew this woman wouldn't be easy to deal with. I see. Big Diviner is intentionally reminding us not to fight among ourselves, but to point our spear at a common enemy. At that moment, Maishi and Pei Luoqi expressed their stance. The truth was that they didn't have any substantive opinions about Raven. After all, Raven was only developing herself in Glio City, and actually wasn't a threat to the Heavenly Tao Alliance and Maishi's nationwide army. But now, because of their modesty, the two of them were doing their utmost to show their loyalty to the Church. Thus, Raven became the common target of their conflict. So, destroy her. Levis knew that the time was ripe. Pretending to be the Supreme Pontiff, he gave the order to Maishi and Pei Luoqi. Chapter 1824. Not long after Jillian sent out a distress signal, the reinforcements he had imagined didn't arrive in time. Instead, a large number of ground troops in grayish-brown combat uniforms and Heavenly Tao Alliance combat troops with the Heavenly Tao Alliance's auspicious cloud logo on them surrounded them from all directions. These were the elite ground troops from Mikoxi and the rest of the Heavenly Tao Alliance's teams, except for Group 2, who had rushed over under Paloki's command. Everything was going as Wang Ling had expected. Thus, the variety show wouldn't be able to continue with the scuffle between the three forces in Glio City. And this was what Wang Ling had planned from the very beginning. The scene immediately descended into chaos. Raven's White Warriors, Parika's Heavenly Law Alliance's army, and Mike Assie's army started a vigorous group fight. They were locked in a fierce battle. This chaos left Group 2's group leader Jiuyun and the 6 child prodigies from Maelstrom Emperor dumbfounded. They had just escaped from the secret room, but the chaos in front of them directly left them dumbfounded, and they had no idea what was going on at all. What's going on? It looks like the White Warriors outside are fighting. Then are we going to record the show or not? Did the production team arrange this? They were just students in the end, and had never seen such a scene in the peaceful cultivation era. When the snow-white bodies of Raven's White Warriors were stained bright red by the blood splattering everywhere, the glaring color also woke up the tense nerves of the people from Maelstrom Emperor and Number 60 High School. This clearly hadn't been deliberately arranged by the production team, but was a small-scale civil war. Everything was real. But, why were they fighting? Heavenly Tao Alliance Group 2's group leader Jiuyun and the 6 child prodigies from Maelstrom Emperor couldn't figure it out. They clearly knew the recording plan for the variety show this time, and were also well aware that it was related to the three forces fighting in front of them. Furthermore, it was a plan that the great Pope had coordinated. In other words, the three forces in front of them were all participants, and Madame Raven was just the main planner. In the end, these three forces were directly fighting each other in front of everyone. I get it. At that moment, Hirogwa cried out in alarm. As a veteran game geek, he quickly thought of a possibility. Is this the legendary dog-beating producer? Wang Ling, everyone. Hirogwa gave a serious analysis. That's the only explanation. Otherwise, why would they start fighting? Think of all the people who have done this. The game designers who are supposed to make money out of it, but every new year, they come up with a bunch of props to destroy the balance of the game. What the hell is this? Everyone fell silent. In this kind of situation, the scene was bloody, and it stimulated everyone's eyes. Let's go. Old Lin has already prepared a car. It's better if we leave this place first, Lotus Sun said. The show would definitely not be able to continue recording. In order to avoid being affected by the battle, everyone could only think of a way to evacuate. Retreat? Then what about our duel? In the Maelstrom Emperor, the team leader was a little dissatisfied. He had been looking forward to this for a long time, and finally had the chance to face off against the legendary number 60 high school. Moreover, he had been very much looking forward to sparring with Lotus Sun, but he hadn't expected that the situation would suddenly become chaotic. Not only would the show be paused, but it was very likely that he would never have a chance to challenge Lotus Sun again. The future is long, there will always be a chance, Lotus Sun replied unhurriedly. Right now, it's more important to ensure everyone's safety. This isn't something we students can participate in. She smiled gracefully, then stared at the people in the Maelstrom Emperor in front of her. Of course, it's actually very simple if you want to exchange pointers with me. You just need to join the Grey Sect. Grey Sect? That literary organization? That's right, I'm also a member of the Grey Sect. Lotus Sun smiled. Every year, our Grey Sect organizes competitions between our disciples, both civil and martial. If you consider joining, you'll have a chance later on. If you're active in the sect, you can even personally apply to the sect leader for a challenge. Hearing this, the eyes of the people in the Maelstrom Emperor instantly lit up. They actually didn't want to be manipulated by Lavin to participate in this terribly fake variety competition at all. Instead, they really wanted to rely on genuine talent to have a fair and just competition with this mysterious Eastern school from Huaxiu Nation. Admittedly, if someone else had said this, they certainly wouldn't have believed it so easily. But it was Lotus Sun who had said it, so it was different. These people in the Maelstrom Emperor were well aware of this young lady's identity and status. She was the young lady of Huagua Water Curtain Group. It wasn't likely that the words of such a person would come out casually. At the same time, Wang Ling saw that Lotus Sun was subconsciously developing the Grey Sect. Wang Ling could only secretly praise her in his heart. Because not long ago on Sun Island, Lotus Sun had just established the Sun Island Grey Sect branch, represented by Chives Sasaki, in the strongest high school there, Nine Paths High School. Who would have thought that she would directly attack the main topic now, and was about to establish a Grey Sect branch headed by Whirlpool Emperor in Glio City? Wang Ling was truly amazed by this kind of organizational and planning ability. She had directly turned an enemy into a friend. After using a short period of time to convince the people in the Maelstrom Emperor, the people from number 60 High School and Whirlpool Emperor finally boarded the bus which Steward Lin had prepared to leave the scene. As they were about to set off, Wang Ling saw Wang Miyu running over from a distance. In front of so many people, this little guy wasn't the least bit embarrassed. He directly jumped up and pounced on Wang Ling's upper body like a koala bear. Wang Ling was helpless. Looking at Wang Miyu's face, the corners of his mouth twitched, but he couldn't really do anything to Wang Miyu. This face was really too similar to his. Wang Ling felt that if he made a move, it would really feel like, I'm hitting myself. Where's that person called Jiu Yun? Hirogwa asked when he saw Wang Miyu come over alone. Ignore him. He's not a primary school student at all. He's the leader of Heavenly Tao Alliance Group 2. The 6 people in the Maelstrom Emperor immediately betrayed Jiu Yun and revealed his true identity. F***K, pretending to be a primary school student? Hirogwa was utterly shocked. Although he had already expected that this program wouldn't be fair, he hadn't expected that Madame Lavin to be so shameless. What kind of expert was the leader of a Heavenly Tao Alliance Group 2? She had actually been sent to face off against a real primary school student. Didn't she feel the least bit ashamed? But Wang Miyu just smiled good-naturedly. It's fine, he didn't do anything to me. On the other side, Jiu Yun, who had been beaten beyond recognition by Wang Miyu, was lying in a shed in the sports center. He had lost his memory after being beaten by Wang Miyu, and couldn't remember what had happened at all. When he came back to his senses, he could only hear the chaotic sounds of fighting outside, as well as the clear sound of footsteps approaching him. I never thought it would actually turn out like this. The person who spoke was a man with a golden vortex on his face. He was the Holy Race's special envoy sent by Holy King, and the person whom the Sea Demon had addressed as Holy Venerable. As His Majesty Holy King expected, the opponent is difficult to deal with. At that moment, he stared at Jiu Yun, who was riddled with scars, and sighed in an ethereal voice. Then, he abruptly turned his head and stared in the direction of the bus where Wang Ling and the others were. It's there, right? Holy Venerable laughed contemptuously. Looks like it's my turn to take the field. Chapter 1825. This Holy Venerable had a gloomy, swirling face. He was certain that there had to be a hidden expert in number 60 high, so after observing Jiu Yun's injuries, he rushed in the direction of the bus without hesitation. Intense killing intent approached from afar. Wang Ling could tell that this person was serious, and really intended to kill a bunch of Foundation Establishment and Golden Core students. For an alien expert whose realm was far above Earth's, killing Foundation Establishment and Golden Core cultivators would be as easy as stepping on ants. There was a hum. In the sky above the bus where Wang Ling and the others were, this Holy Venerable directly walked out of the center of the golden vortex. His face couldn't be seen clearly, but one could clearly sense a mocking smile in the vortex. Then, he straightaway struck out with his palm, which turned into a cage that covered the sky. It was a cage constructed of super-dense spiritual energy molecules. The inside of the cage had its own universal environment. Once someone was locked inside, they would have to bear the immense pressure of the universe, which was not something that cultivators in the building foundation stage or the core formation stage could resist. Wang Ling, what should we do? Lotus Sun asked telepathically. She could also tell that this was a tough test from the opponent, who wanted to directly filter out who on earth the hidden almighty was among them. The girl grit her teeth, and the blue sword chi around her was ready to be unleashed. She was ready to protect everyone in Wang Ling's stead. Even if her strength was exposed, there would always be a way to deal with it later, such as erasing the memories of those who had seen the scene, whether it was physical or magical erasure. Lotus Sun was already very familiar with them. But what she didn't expect was, this time, the youngster actually walked forward with his hands in the pockets of his school uniform. The golden vortex behind this holy sage released an incomparably dazzling light that illuminated the sky in front of it. Under this dazzling halo of light, the people from number 60 High School and Maelstrom Emperor all saw Wang Ling's figure walking forward alone. The moment the palm cage collided, the youngster's figure, which looked slightly thin and frail, actually disintegrated the entire cage with just one finger. Wang Ling, Super Chen, Hirogwa, Li Yuyue, and the 6 people in the Maelstrom Emperor's jaws dropped, their faces filled with extreme astonishment. They rubbed their eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. I'm not dreaming, right? Is this really Wang Ling? Is Lingzi really that powerful? Super Chen and Hirogwa, who usually joked about Wang Ling being a lucky mascot, in particular, had expressions of shock that were almost indescribable in words. They would never have thought that Wang Ling would actually be a hidden top cultivator. Obviously, this was a monster. Even the 6 people in the Maelstrom Emperor broke out in a cold sweat. They had always felt that Madame Lavin's arrangements were unfair. After all, in terms of strength on paper, their average strength was higher than that of Maelstrom Emperor, who was at the Golden Core stage. Asking a bunch of Foundation establishment cultivators from number 60 high to compete with them was really too much of a bully. Most importantly, they even invited one of the Heavenly Law Union's team leaders to pretend to be a primary school student and participate in the competition. But looking at it now, such an arrangement seemed to be quite reasonable. Because there was also a hidden big shot hidden among the people from number 60 high. Furthermore, it was actually the one who looked the most harmless. At the same time, Wang Ling's school uniform emitted golden red immortal chi. This was the Immortal King's shield, which he had constructed with primordial chi, spirit chi, and the power of primordial chi, and it instantly covered everyone present. It was obvious that the Immortal King's shield had been enchanted with a rune language that was completely incomprehensible. But Fang Xing more or less knew what this spell was for. It referred to the memory-erasing spell that had been fixed. Those who were completely unaware of Wang Ling's strength would only remember how strong Wang Ling was when the Immortal King's shield was placed on them. Once the Immortal King's shield was deactivated, everyone's memories would revert to Wang Ling being just a lucky mascot. This was what Wang Ling had in mind for the future. This way, he wouldn't have to erase these people's memories every time. In any case, it would only take a blink of an eye to end the battle. It really is you. I knew there was something wrong with you. On the other side, the holy sage in the sky had a pleasantly surprised expression on his face when he saw that his cage had been broken. The palm prison was just a basic spell used for probing, and hadn't even used a tenth of his strength. He soared into the air and swept his foot across, wanting to kill Wang Ling with one kick. In a flash, his right leg was densely covered in runes and shrouded in golden light, and a vortex appeared where the sole of his foot was as it flew forward. Space was already completely distorted, and there was a power that seemed to be stirring everything up. If this kick landed, the explosive impact would directly affect the entire area. Wang Ling reacted with lightning speed, and at the same time as he grabbed the foot, he pulled the other party into his intrinsic spirit field. At the same time, everyone in the vicinity was brought inside. Wang Ling's intrinsic spirit field had been built on number 60 high school's foundation, and a lot of people here felt like they had returned to number 60 high school. Boom! As Wang Ling had expected, although he didn't feel any pain after blocking the blow with just one hand, the immense impact still caused the ground behind him to cave in as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It was a crater with a radius of thousands of feet, and cracks spread out in all directions. It was clear how powerful this holy sage's kick had been. But it was clear that the other party had underestimated the strength of Wang Ling's body. Expressionless, Wang Ling grabbed the man's ankle and swung him through the air like a skipping rope, violently slamming him into the ground with astonishing force. The intrinsic spirit field trembled continuously, as if it was experiencing a major earthquake. Wang Ling hadn't fully exerted his full strength yet, but this holy sage had already been beaten beyond recognition by Wang Ling's repeated attacks. The golden vortex on his face had directly deformed and sunk in deeply, and yellow blood spurted out of the center of the vortex. A supreme expert with a sage body. Holy Sage was stupefied, his head had been smashed senseless. He had thought that Wang Ling was just an ordinary eternal-level expert, but after launching a careless attack, he was stunned to realize that this wasn't the case. The youngster had grabbed his ankle, and in that instant, Holy Sage saw a faint layer of golden red light covering the youngster's body. It was like a sparkling golden red jade, sparkling and translucent, without the slightest flaw. The mark of a sage body was that the flesh and bones in the body could turn a faint golden color, which was what Buddhism called indestructible. Generally speaking, the stronger a person was, the thicker this golden color would be. However, the golden red saint body was something he had never seen before. It was a crystal clear golden red. Only the strongest of the saint body could cultivate this kind of saint body where even the bone marrow and blood vessels were tempered to perfection. This person, who on earth was he? Chapter 1826. There was no doubt that this was a crushing education. Wang Ling was dragging this holy sage by the ankles and beating him wantonly on the ground like a scarecrow, and he no longer had the imposing air of a holy sage like he had when he had first appeared. His whirlpool face was now bruised and swollen, and yellow blood kept spurting out. Even his aura was much weaker, as if he had been beaten to the point of death. Wang Ling's crazy output could be described as moving clouds and flowing water. The students from No. 60 High School and Maelstrom Imperial High School who had been completely clueless about Wang Ling earlier were all stupefied, as if they were dreaming and couldn't believe what they were seeing. As expected of their dad, Wang Muyu teleported to the top of the school building, which was an excellent vantage point with a wide field of view. At the same time, he kept an eye on this holy sage who was being beaten up like crazy. It could only be said that the sacred race's holy venerates were a bit stronger than ordinary primordial ones. In terms of combat power, Wang Muyu felt that this holy venerate was much stronger than Jing Zhe and Yen Ruo. In the end, he was still beaten up by Wang Ling until he didn't even have the strength to fight back. But at the same time, Wang Muyu also knew that this wasn't the end. Every race had their own characteristics. They knew very little about the holy race. Apart from knowing that they had strange whirlpool faces, there didn't seem to be anything else special about them. He knew that although Wang Ling had beaten him up badly, he hadn't directly killed the other party because he still wanted to feel out what else the holy race had up their sleeves. I thought Lingzi wasn't a normal person, but I didn't expect him to be so brutal. Super Chen was very excited. Although he still hadn't completely digested what was happening to Wang Ling, this scene still gave him a sense of comfort from the bottom of his heart. That's right. Hero Gua nodded. As a good brother, he was equally proud of Wang Ling. We should have realized it earlier. After all, not everyone can be like Wang Ling, who scores above average in every exam. Actually, I also suspected that there was something wrong with Lingzi. For example, he was able to win several major competitions, which was very strange. We clearly aren't that strong. At that moment, Wang Ling's existence was completely revealed to the people of No. 60 High like the sun dispelling the clouds. It was just that this holy clan member in front of him was still a mystery to him. He can't kill you. Get up and fight again. No matter what, you have to pull out a few of his teeth. At that moment, Wang Ling, Wang Muyu, and Lotus Sun heard a voice from the other side. A giant golden eye opened in the depths of the universe, and its gaze pierced through the layers of space to directly enter the intrinsic spirit field. Wang Ling noticed this mysterious gaze. At the same time, he followed the line of sight that seemed to be transmitted from the other side of the universe and saw the true form of the giant golden eye. For a moment, his thoughts were running wild. That was because the appearance of this giant eye was very similar to that of the universe blood fetus, which he had previously obtained from the outer divine palace. Wang Ling currently still had that universe blood fetus, and he infused it with a lot of spirit power every day. But that universe ghost fetus was like a baby that could never be fed. No matter how much energy Wang Ling poured into it, the flower bud never bloomed. Thus, Wang Ling wondered if something had gone wrong at some point. In other words, there was another cosmic freak. He had to collect both of them in order to have a resonance reaction. He thought that it would be a long time before he could find any new clues, but he did not expect to receive new information from the sacred ones. Wang Ling deliberately waited. On the ground, the Lord, whose face was swollen and bruised, quickly stood up with a new look. It had a powerful self-healing ability and could also shorten the duration of the heavy injury effect. Wang Ling couldn't help but praise this kind of recovery method. It was much better than what Baizha had done back then. Gui Laolu, try to kill him. Even if we can't kill him, we have to cripple him. How can the prestige of our saint race fall into the hands of an earthling? The members of the Holy Clan from the other side of the universe were still instigating Wang Ling again through the universe nightmare embryo in their hands. They shared a common hatred for a common enemy and looked like they wanted nothing more than to skin Wang Ling alive. Wang Ling raised his eyelids disinterestedly. He didn't care about this bunch of clowns at all. He stared at Holy Master Ghost 6, who had stood up once more, and said indifferently, "Is that enough?" Ghost Old Six's face darkened as he looked at Wang Ling and said, "You're too conceited. You're actually being soft-hearted in battle? If you want to fight, you have to fight until the other party has no breathing room at all. I admit that I underestimated you earlier, but our holy clan isn't so easy to deal with." He snorted. As soon as he said this, he immediately stamped his foot on the ground, and countless golden tentacles stretched out from the cracks in the ground to directly grab Wang Ling's ankle. Wang Ling frowned slightly. It wasn't that this method was strange, but that the moment the golden tentacle wrapped around Wang Ling's ankle, he had sensed through it that this holy venerable had the power of the bloodline of a ruler of the old days. Strands of immortal chi mixed with the power of primordial chaos shook off the golden tentacles. Wang Ling had originally wanted to scare them back into the ground, but he hadn't expected them to become even more aggressive as they fought. Even more golden tentacles emerged from the ground, and many glazed scales formed on the surface of the tentacles. Wang Ling's expression was cold as he directly grabbed one of the tentacles and peeled off the scales. In the end, he was stunned to find that the scales on it weren't ordinary scales, but dragon scales, and that wasn't the most outrageous thing. The most outrageous thing was, after Wang Ling pulled off the dragon scale, it was as if the golden tentacles had been stimulated by something, and countless wings actually sprouted from their bodies. They were holy, crystalline, and extremely sharp. As they flung the tentacles about, the wings instantly turned into blades of light that fell off the golden tentacles and surged toward Wang Ling. In that instant, the place where Wang Ling was standing was bombarded. Smoke and dust rose in all directions, and the ground that had been rained down by this massive amount of spirit power was a fiery red, as if it was being roasted by the sun. So strong. Lotus Sun sighed in her heart. After all, this was Wang Ling's intrinsic spirit field. To be able to be so unbridled in an environment that was disadvantageous to them, this holy clan really couldn't be underestimated. But at this point in the battle, a question slowly popped up in Wang Ling's heart. He had imagined many possibilities of the holy clan, but had never thought that they would actually be a bunch of hybrids, or to put it bluntly, to use a modern internet catchphrase. Good heavens! This race was simply the ultimate stitched monster. Chapter 1827. No matter what, Wang Ling never expected the holy clan to be a hybrid product of ancient cultivators, the god race, the dragon race, and the rulers of the old days. The most outrageous thing about this wasn't that the holy clan had the blood of the dragon race and the rulers of the old days, but that the holy clan also had the blood of ancient cultivators. In other words, the holy clan was still essentially human. This was what terrified Wang Ling the most. According to Wang Ling's deductions, the holy clan was the first to have a hybrid with the rulers of the old days, followed by the dragon race and the god race. So how hungry must that big brother have been back then to choose to mate with those alien monsters with tentacles all over their bodies? The most outrageous thing was that they actually really gave birth to a hybrid child. Then, that first hybrid child became the first holy clan leader, and inherited his father's fine tradition by developing feelings for a dragon. Given that they were already a hybrid, they mixed their blood again, giving birth to a hybrid who was simultaneously a human ancient cultivator, a ruler of the old days, and a dragon. It was only when the god race entered the picture that the current holy clan was formed. At the same time, Wang Ling also deduced that the holy clan had merged with quite a few other races during this period, but because their bloodlines were too weak, they weren't of much use at all. So the current holy clan was actually really weird. In Wang Ling's view, this kind of hybrid behavior was no different from using one's own bloodline to raise goo. Logically speaking, there should be a racial segregation mechanism in the universe. Even if the mechanism failed sometimes, resulting in a hybrid, the hybrid would most likely become physically weak and deformed because of the racial mismatch, and it would be impossible for them to survive. It was clear that the original holy clan leader had withstood all these tests back then, and had indeed survived with the bloodlines of two different races. Furthermore, his birth had laid a solid foundation for the holy clan to absorb the other races in the universe. The holy clan, the soul of the holy clan is the best of the best. Go, Ghost Old Six, kill him directly. At that moment, a voice in the distance egged him on again. This holy venerable called Ghost Old Six immediately erupted, and thousands of golden tentacles surged out of the ground under his feet to form 1,000 hands on his back. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a strange dharma form of an ancient god. It was a golden ancient god with only half a body, surrounded by 10,000 tentacles that had morphed into arms, a godly halo above its head, and a pair of dragon wings on its back. Even Wang Ling had never seen such a dharma form before, and it instantly caused the air to collapse inch by inch. At a time like this, fighting inside the intrinsic spirit field wouldn't be able to withstand this kind of attack. Heavens! At the critical moment, Wang Ling activated his king's eye and released its golden pupil power. An ancient radiance seemed to extend from ancient times to the present, giving off a feeling of eternity. After dealing with the 10 shelter creatures the last time, he once again used his king's eye to summon the heavenly world, which was above the supreme world, Heavenly King's Eye. People were so stunned that they couldn't speak when they sensed it, and the fluctuations that clan leader Wang had felt. At such a close distance, the visual impact was too explosive, and it wasn't something that any special effects movie in the modern cultivation world could match. The Golden Heaven City was as tall as the sky, and the ancient buildings with towering watchtowers overflowed with light and color, exuding an unparalleled divinity that filled the entire sky. Just looking at it with the naked eye and feeling it with the body was enough to make people involuntarily drop to their knees and worship it. Heaven's City, even Wang Muyu was stupefied. This was the first time he had seen Wang Ling use this kind of technique, and there was a stunned expression on his little face. Only the strong would understand how outrageous this was. As for Super Chen, Hero Gua and the others, because of the huge disparity in their realms and the fact that they had the Immortal King's shield, they weren't afraid of the oppressive might, which prevented them from directly perceiving the effect. Even though they knew that this was an amazing technique, they couldn't understand the meaning of this Heaven's City for the moment. The only word that could describe the shock in their hearts and minds was F***K, there's actually such a thing. Even Gue Old Six couldn't believe that a human cultivator from Earth could actually open the door above the supreme world. He had thought that he could directly disintegrate Wang Ling's intrinsic spirit field after summoning his Dharma form spirit, but unexpectedly, this young man from Earth had directly dissolved it with his power of sight and summoned this kind of heaven's world to completely cover the intrinsic spirit field. Compared with the intrinsic spirit field just now, the strength of this heaven's world was self-evident. Although his hybrid ancient god couldn't break through, he was still very excited. Because this meant that he could wreak havoc here. Buzz. With the hybrid ancient god as the source, Gue Old Six controlled the massive power of chaos to condense it. The hybrid ancient god's body instantly swelled up and stood out in the Golden Heaven City like a chimpanzee tearing off the roof tiles as it turned into the size of a city. Hiss, the onlookers couldn't help sucking in their breaths of cold air. This kind of great divine power wasn't something that people at their level could come into contact with. If Wang Ling hadn't intentionally left them behind to watch, they might not have been able to touch this level even after hundreds or thousands of years. Everything was like a dream. Lotus Sun was also in a daze. For one thing, she was awed by the fierce battle scene, and for another, she was attracted by the figure of the young man in the sky. Only Wang Ling could tug at her heart all the time and make her thoughts wander uncontrollably. The enemy this time was really strong. Lotus Sun could indeed sense it. But for some reason, as long as Wang Ling was around, she always felt at ease. This ancient god is too big, it's as big as a city. Even movies don't dare use special effects like this. How are we going to fight this? Is Wang Ling going to be okay? Hero Gua's heart was pounding. He'll definitely be fine. Everyone, be careful. Just don't rush to the front to watch, said Lotus Sunday. Your mistake was to drag this bunch of lowly ants here to watch. At that moment, Gue Old Six, who had expanded the hybrid ancient god to the size of a city, smiled at Wang Ling. In order to keep you focused, I've decided to wipe out these ants first. As soon as he said that, he directly made a move. As his white sleeves flapped, the strange hybrid ancient god behind him moved swiftly at the same time. Like a comet crashing into the earth, a fist fell from the sky and punched in the direction of number 60 high and the people in Maelstrom Imperial Palace. Wang Ling calculated its trajectory and arrived at the scene the moment the fist fell. Surrounded by immortal chi, he stretched out his fist to meet the hybrid ancient god head-on. Boom! In that instant, the hybrid ancient god's fist, which was as big as a comet, exploded on the spot under Wang Ling's blow. Chapter 1828. Everyone's expressions changed and they all sucked in cold breaths. Wang Ling's punches, which were as big as comets, had met them head-on like a drill, and instantly smashed them to smithereens. Wang Ling was too ferocious, and his strength was immeasurable. A conservative estimate of the power of that punch just now was more than 1,000 nuclei. What's a nuclei? After hearing this concept, Super Chen and the others were puzzled, and asked the others, is that a unit of combat strength? It's a unit of combat strength that can only be measured after reaching a realm that you can't even imagine. The power of one nuclei can easily destroy a planet the size of Earth and kill anyone below the progenitor realm, Lotus Sun replied at that moment. Damn! Then Wang Ling's punch just now had 1,000 nuclei. And this isn't even classmate Wang Ling's full strength, freak. Why do I have such a freak living by my side? Super Chen couldn't help swearing. That being said, Lotus Sun could still see and sense the excitement on their faces. But at that moment, amidst his excitement, Super Chen suddenly noticed a blind spot. Boss Sun, why do you know so much? Even Steward Lin, who was standing on the side, was baffled by this question. He and his friends were already completely dumbfounded, and had no idea what on earth was going on. But at least Wang Ling's showdown this time made Steward Lin suddenly understand a little why his miss was so interested in this ordinary Earth youngster. It was a pity that there was no cell phone signal in the heavenly world at the moment, otherwise he would definitely ask Bihu, what should I do if my miss falls in love with a nuclear bomb? I'm waiting online, it's urgent. It was actually classmate Wang Ling who told me telepathically just now. In a moment of desperation, Lotus Sun could only blurt out a lie. Her face was bright red, and anyone could see that her expression was uncomfortable. But in this situation, everyone was attracted by the magnificent battle scene in front of them, and no one bothered to check whether Lotus Sun's words were true or not. Normally, Super Chen would definitely have sensed that something was wrong right away. Telepathically? Why were you the only one who did it? When did the relationship between the two of you become so good? But now, like everyone else, all his thoughts were focused on the battle in front of him, and at the same time, he was doing his best to use his limited cultivation knowledge to refresh his overturned outlook on cultivation. Wang Ling's fist was like a meat bullet, and as he crashed into it fiercely, his whole body surged with golden light, like a Captain Marvel in a sci-fi movie. A long golden light trailed behind his body. At the same time, it was mixed with the original vital energy, the chaotic weapon, the spiritual energy, and other different energies from all over the universe. Finally, it gathered into a mixed immortal energy, which pushed his aura to the extreme and revealed his unparalleled combat ability. There was no doubt that Wang Ling at this time was at the top of human cultivators, and had the very best in his spirit in. He was like the chosen one who had been awakened from the ancient times. From start to finish, he had completely crushed his opponent. Wang was in him. Quickly. The ancient god hybrid healed extremely quickly. The moment his entire right arm was split into hundreds of millions of pieces by Wang Ling's punch, spirit power surged violently, and the broken pieces swiftly merged back into a whole. The Earth youngster in front of him was too strange, and had never been seen before. He clearly wasn't an ancient being, but his aura crushed everything else. His physical strength alone had reached such an astonishing level. Not only did he have the most powerful heavenly world, he wasn't at a disadvantage at all in front of his hybrid ancientling. So, what kind of monster was this? Ghost Old Six's expression was solemn. He swiftly made a hand seal, and a familiar and terrifying aura burst forth and permeated the entire heavenly world. A huge palace rose from the ground. It was pitch black all over and covered in strange runes. The entire palace was hanging upside down, like an illusory ghost palace. It was completely out of place with the golden buildings in the heavenly world. Outer God Palace, Wang Ling frowned. He had been wondering why this ghost old six could still move freely and brandish his fists in the face of the heavenly world's pressure. It turned out that he had the support of an outer God Palace. And it wasn't just one outer God Palace, these outer deity palaces seemed to have been invaded by a virus. They directly connected together and rose up from the ground in an inverted manner in the heavenly worlds. They intersected like fangs, forming two distinct worlds of darkness and light. This time, even Lotus Sun, who knew a lot, was stunned. She knew about the outer god palaces, but had never thought that after Wang Ling had destroyed one outer god palace, someone would actually be able to summon so many of them. Although these palaces weren't as majestic as they had been before, the main point was that there were so many of them that they gave off a strong sense of deterrence. More importantly, these outer god palaces gathered together formed a clear resistance in the heavenly world as they challenged Wang Ling. This hybrid race is too scary. Lotus Sun sighed in her heart. She had never thought that as a hybrid race, the holy race would actually be able to use the bloodline of the rulers of the old days to this extent. Not only could they control the remaining universe ghoul fetus, they could even control the outer god palace. And this was just a trump card of a holy sage's subordinates. Wouldn't the holy king behind them be even more tyrannical? In Wang Ling's view, the appearance of these outer god palaces in the heavenly world was a kind of infiltration. The rulers of the old days had always been very aggressive, so the moment these outer god palaces appeared, Wang Ling pondered the other party's intentions. Did they want to infiltrate his heavenly world and then annex it? It was a very good idea. At least in Wang Ling's eyes, it was absolutely praiseworthy. But at the same time, Wang Ling also felt that it was a pity for Ghost Old Six's stupidity. It was obvious that someone at Gue Lu's level didn't understand what kind of existence the All Heavens world was, nor did he understand why there were so many golden palaces in the All Heavens world that formed such a large golden All Heavens city. Yes, every golden building in the heavenly city symbolized a civilization that had once disappeared in the universe. Although they were the same color, they were completely different in style. Wang Ling had now taken in these different civilizations one by one like figurines and integrated them into his heavenly world to form this heavenly city. At that moment, Wang Ling stared at the outer god palaces that Ghost Old Six had summoned and couldn't help smiling disdainfully. Since you gave them to me for free, then I'll take them all. He raised his hand and slowly folded his fingers. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.